Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the warm little pond. Today, I have with me, joining me in the pond, is friend of the channel, Charis Euphranor. Will you please introduce yourself to our audience here?
Hello, fellow pondists. I'm Charis Euphranor. I'm the first and last Philosopher VTuber, the last librarian of Alexandria. And today we're talking about life.
Or ostensibly,
in this nice pond.
We're technically going to talk about life. Maybe at the very end, because there are more important things to talk about than life, and that is philosophy. Do you want to give a top line, what you do on your channel for people who are not familiar with you?
I'm a VTuber. That means I am a person who represents themselves as an anime avatar on the internet.
Very good.
Occasionally, I will make, occasionally, probably like a few times a week, I will make streams. And when I click the go live button, I talk about my day or other things or the video game that I am playing. That tends to happen. Occasionally, I'll dip into something controversial and talk about things like feminism, which really shouldn't be controversial, but is. Many things are controversial that shouldn't be. But anyways, I like to talk about a range of topics. I consider myself a philosopher VTuber only insofar as I've trained as a philosopher, in the sense that I have 2 degrees in it, unfortunately. But I don't really talk about specific philosophical topics unless it's brought up. Not that I don't. It depends on my mood, really. It really does. But if you have any questions at all, you can ask me. And if I don't know the answer to your question, I can either give you another question, or I could direct you to someone who might have something interesting to say.
That's perfect philosopher stuff. Totally deflecting.
The answer is it's nuanced, it depends. It's complicated.
It's true. And then so the reason why I have Charis on today is to talk a little bit about epistemics and pedagogy. I have a little topics list thing that I have here, because I think it's really interesting what the Origin of Life video did to my biochemistry, like my brain biochemistry. Because Charis and I had been chatting behind the scenes, and I think the normal fly video that I would make is very much me mama birding food into your mouths, right? I've read the papers for you, I've digested them into simpler terms, and I've kind of regurgitated it back out. And as disgusting as that sounds, it's a little true, in the sense of a naive audience to biology needs that kind of simplification. But the eventual goal for my streams is to make that science thinking happen in your own head, so that one day you will leave the coop and not need me to digest it for you, instead maybe just define the terms for you, right? That's the eventual goal. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as a pedagogical philosophy later on. But before, I wanted to say just this. In my video on abiogenesis, I do make fun of philosophers just a little bit. Just it's so little. I don't know, Charis, if you saw that part in my video where I poke just the slightest fun at philosophers.
It was honestly just a slight stray. I didn't even feel like. Can I say that when you did that, I laughed and I was like, that's hilarious. And then throughout the video, with that joke in mind, I was so I don't know if it was because of it or in spite of it. I actually really appreciated how rigorous you were, and how well you defined your terms, and how you understood the scope of your problem in such a way that I can only describe as philosophically adept. It seemed to me that you were moving like a philosopher, maybe is one way I would put it.
Yeah, because here's the deep dark truth about me. I like philosophy. I joke about philosophy in my science. That's gross. As a freaking joke, dude. There's so many people who took that seriously. It's come on, man, don't make fun of philosophy. I'm come on, don't take yourself too seriously. It's the slightest of ribs, the slightest of strays. And I also had a 20-minute talk about epistemology in my 70-minute video. You think I really don't like philosophy? It was so funny, the reaction.
It's okay. We all know that nobody hates philosophers as much as other philosophers.
That's what I was surprised. This was a joke for philosophers, right? It was a joke for them, and yet there are still people who are stop making fun of philosophy. I'm not. I like philosophy. It's cool, dude. We're gonna talk about philosophy today, especially epistemology, which I think is something that was really a recurrent issue in abiogenesis. Is the hard limit of our knowledge here. But first, let me just say hi to everybody in stream, and then we will move right on along. So, hello, Derico. Hello, Hannah. Hello, Tigor. Hello, Kingpin. Hello, Hero Blaze. Hello, Mylan. Welcome, Mylan. Mylan being a fellow member of V Theorem, Psychology and Statistics VTuber. Hello, Xbox. Who else? Hello, Delta. Welcome. A yummy research paper pulp. Yeah, pretty much. Like, it's okay to enjoy the research paper pulp when it is digested for you, but know that my goal is to move you up to solid foods. And I think that's similar for you, right, Charis? Like, I think you downplay a little bit about what you do as being like, because like when I'm in your streams, you're almost always talking about some, well, at least recently, because you've been playing some dating sims, which have dovetailed nicely with feminism, which I think is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And the Sigmaverse, which I think was a little bit less philosophy in that stream.
Do you mean like I sort of like undersell the kind of like approach I have to like streaming?
Yeah.
Like,
I think you can harder sell, like, if you like my content, I think they will probably like your content too. Even though we do on the face of it different things, but the operation that happens in the brain is very similar, in my opinion.
I think like you're absolutely cooking with the mama bird analogy. Like I do strongly believe that like if like the philosophy shouldn't how do I best put this? I think there's a problem with philosophy that just sedates people. Like it just sort of puts them into a calm ease and goes and makes them think like, oh, okay, well, if the world and the universe is structured in such a way that, for example, if you're a determinist, oh, none of my choices matter, there's no free will. Okay, I'll throw my arms up and, whatever, it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Who cares? Nothing matters. I think like the philosophy that sedates people is dangerous because I think it's one, it itself is uninteresting. I find it boring, similar to what you I think there's a parallel between this and some of the theories you mentioned in the abiogenesis video you made, where it's like it's not technically like it's not disprovably incorrect. Like it is a viable, like somewhat logical, reasonable hypothesis to make, but it's so boring. It's so boring to go like, well, actually, yeah, it'll all work out, so there's nothing to do. It's so uninteresting. There's nothing that happens afterwards. There's nothing to chew on, and I guess maybe for me as well, it's a preference thing. I don't really want to, I don't really want to engage with an approach to philosophy that doesn't get people thinking and moving and struggling and overcoming and triumphing over their previous difficulties and all that. I think there's a remarkable void in this poking and prodding of the mind in entertainment. Part of the reason why I undersell myself, or maybe like why I intentionally at least portray myself in a certain casual, I'm just a VTuber, I just like play video games, is because I feel like there's such a huge separation between entertainment and like education. And education itself has a whole load of issues too, but the entertainment is sedative. Like it is what makes it entertainment and not what makes a movie not art, or like at least is more of an entertainment thing than it is an art thing, is when it sedates people. It stops you from thinking from almost like not suffering, but from like feeling the pain and other complex emotions that it's instilling into you to make you think, to make you do, to make you ponder in a way that extends beyond your previous framework. Like that's so missing that what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to infiltrate that sphere of mere entertainment, the sphere of, I'm just an anime boy playing like a dating sim, and actually try to poke at people and go like, okay, but like, what do you mean by when you say certain things? Why do you think these things? Why do you spend 10 hours on Twitter every day, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I guess we just start off with philosophy that sedates, because I think that's a great first topic to talk about, because it is like I feel such an affinity for this idea because of this whole like mama bird, and it ties into what you're saying of like the best things in life are things that you have to work a little bit for, right? And, you know, I consume philosophy content too, right? I consume quite a bit of it in terms of like podcasts and stuff, but it's a very, up until you yourself play with the ideas, it's a very passive experience where like, oh, this podcast episode is on Freud and what Freud believed. And if you don't critically engage with that, then all that is just ASMR, right? It's not, it makes you feel a certain way temporarily, but I think in both science and in philosophy, it's like the important operation happens from when you are struggling to have everything make sense in your head, right? So for my philosophy in creating scientific, you know, science content is one where I do not shy away from, even though I am mama birding, I'm like barely chewing on the food, right? I'm not, it's not like pulp quite, it's not very pulpy, but I'm giving you like, I did not read it from a different source. I put together it from the primary scientific papers and put together my own story so that it only went through one person or two people, I guess. It went through the scientists and then it went through me. That's like minimally processed, homegrown, you know, pesticide free, all organic, right? Like minimally processed food. But on stream where I actually look at the papers themselves and give you the data and I ask you leading questions to make you tackle that data and I tell you you're wrong all the time because you don't know what a Western blot is, that's good actually, that people disagree and people get things wrong, because that's the interesting part of learning and having that kind of engaging sort of content. And so I love this, you know, maybe content that sedates, right? It's just this like non-challenging, easy listening. But if you have my content on the second monitor, I joke about it that I made second monitor content, but if you genuinely had it on the second monitor, I would bet you're missing out on a lot that is very interesting. And I think in an era of like AI slop content, like having something really challenging and accessible, if you are willing to work for it, is what I want to do. And I think it's also what you want to do. It's like, it's not about, well, what did Freud say? Well, okay, you can easily read, not easily, they're hard to read, but like you can find content that will explain in very simple terms what Freud's philosophy was, for example. But until you have somebody who is live and on the screen to converse with, that idea becomes very passive because there's nobody there to challenge you unless you challenge yourself. I'm not saying you need Charis for a philosophy experience, but what I'm saying is that if you want to have your ideas challenged, then I think you should show up to one of his streams. Don't like heckle him, okay? Like heckling is not the same.
Please heckle me.
All right,
please.
maybe heckle him.
Please come in and give me your worst. Do your worst. I've seen everything. I did a male loneliness epidemic stream. You have no idea the types of comments that I've gotten there. That I'm like, how does YouTube allow this? This is crazy. And I can't, like, I can't swear. I do, but like, I'm told I can't swear on my streams. And then there are these people who say like things that are just so much more like vile and disgusting, and it's allowed to just exist there. It's crazy in my video. Anyways,
it's so
you're
funny.
allowed to come to my stream and do whatever you want, except for disagree with me. If you disagree with me, if you don't follow everything I say exactly, you are immediately sent to a dungeon.
That's so true. But the idea is that this manic energy, you can find that on his streams. It's a lot of fun. Go follow him, okay? It's a lot of fun.
Thank you.
But yeah, but the philosophy that sedates goes back into kind of the ultimate goal of making content in this format, right? And it's a risk, I think. Something that I've seen online with VTubers who are thinking about getting into science content is that there's this kind of fear that the audience that they have will leave them once they start talking about science. And I'm like, this is the golden era, baby. Like, this is like, if you want to push traditional science content, then there's no better time than to do it right now. And I think if you wait too long, then there are going to be, then this market will saturate too, right? Because the live format is something that's different than something that like Kierkegaard does or SciShow does. This ability to converse and have a back and forth with a person is something that is unique and challenging to a certain degree. Like in my journal club streams, I'll ask people questions and they'll get things wrong and I can correct them, and that's called learning. Similarly, in your streams, it's like this idea of the back and forth and actually having views systematically challenged. And the difference between you and me is that I don't want to be heckled. I will ban people for heckling me. I will only take good faith arguments, but I don't have as much of a rigorous background in debate as you might. Some of those comments, King is saying some of those comments are also too young. Yeah, I think a lot of the horrible comments come from like children who don't know anything. And it's so annoying because you don't know that they're children. And the fact that some of these terrible comments could come from adults is like supremely depressing.
Can I say that, like, to me, it's almost immediately obvious when a comment is from a teenager.
I think it's pretty obvious, but there's always some doubt in the back of my head where like, this is a fully realized adult and they have just terrible opinions.
But then if they're fully realized, they wouldn't have written that. That's like the way I think of it.
That's only if there is one objective way of being realized, right? Which I think is also kind of an interesting thread to go down, where it's like, who decides who's realized? Well, from my perspective, if you are leaving angry comments on a science video, that is not that controversial, right? Like, I didn't do the like atheist dunks on Christians abiogenesis video that the algorithm loves. Right? I didn't do that. Okay. I didn't do that. I had it as kind and rigorous as possible. And I didn't do the whole elbow dropping thing that the algorithm loves, because the algorithm loves that conflict. And even so, I still get comments that are like, you don't know anything. I'm like, I think I know a couple of things.
Unless that was Socrates, in which case he's right, you know?
That's true. Socrates was a goat for sure. It's so funny. If we're gonna, I guess maybe, do you have anything else to say about philosophy sedates? Because we can just move to pedagogy and then
I think we can move. Let's
go back to epistemology at some point. But like, why do I have you on? It's self-indulgence, right? I think I just like talking. We just like talking about similar things, I think. Pedagogy. Socrates, do you want to give a 101 for who the bro was and what he was known for?
Socrates was?
Yeah.
Oh, well, he was like this. He was this guy in Greece. He was like really annoying. They executed him publicly because of how annoying. No, so he's a philosopher. There's so much I can get into because who was it? Was it Whitehead or somebody else that was like Western philosophy is just footnotes to Plato, and Plato is like Plato's whole philosophy is based largely on his teacher Socrates. You may have heard of him. Socrates himself was a teacher. He refused to write anything down. He did not want to, like, he just wanted to yap. He wanted to go into the streets of Athens and just start talking to people. And in particular, he wanted to go out and prove how everyone was wrong, or at least he wanted to like get people to realize that what they thought they knew wasn't quite based on something as concrete as they assumed to be, and to shake the foundations of everyone's beliefs, basically. And this makes for a phenomenal educational experience, I think, partly at least. I think it's missing something. It's missing a key ingredient, but we can get into that later, right? But it's him going around the streets of Athens asking people, hey, you say you know a lot about politics. How do you know that? And then, the person starts explaining themselves, and he kind of goes like, okay, what is it? And you might recognize this as the Socratic method. You might recognize this as a way in which we educate people is by asking them a lot of questions. And it's true to some extent that there are a lot of, I think most people's understanding of Socrates kind of ends there. I have a very specific reading of Socrates that I'm not going to get into because it's going to take a while. That is Kierkegaard informed, where essentially Socrates is almost one of a teacher and one that tries to bring about this like deeper intrinsic experience that's very relevant to like the well-being of you and your soul and all that, and like how that is a similar but not the same process as like almost one's religious or faith-based experiences, which I understand might sound very, very like initially, but I promise it's an interesting read, at least if you read it from Kierkegaard. But Socrates was basically, he was that guy who would walk around asking people questions, and he was annoying. He was so annoying, the government was like, this guy is corrupting the youth of today, isn't he? We must poison him with hemlock. And then they did. They put it to a vote, and he was voted to be executed. And rather than running away, because he was offered to do an escape by like his friends, he was just like, no, I'll just drink the hemlock, I'll die here, it's fine. And then he did that.
Dude, what a Chad. But also he's like the worst YouTube commenter, like for real though.
Oh yeah,
But
he's
like,
so
how
annoying.
do you know that? But like, how does anybody know anything? I'm like, shut up, dude. Okay, we know some things. But the reason why I like Socrates and his method is because it is less about the content. I don't think Socrates, like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, having a more nuanced understanding of him, but I don't think I think the only concretely held belief Socrates had was that knowledge is fallible. Like, epistemology is a thing. Your grounds for knowledge are relatively fragile, certainly more fragile than you think. And I think that's maybe his only strongly held belief.
It's interesting you mentioned this, because in some texts that is like pretty much that is like the best way to read him, like to make sense of the Platonic dialogues. But in some texts, he talks about knowing certain things, like justice and love. Like he claims like, oh, I know a lot about this, and
Dude,
let me
that's
talk about it. And
crazy.
he presents his like theory, and then sometimes he's like, actually, I don't know anything.
Oh, okay.
And
that
so
makes
like I
more
think
sense.
what's more interesting is less like trying to dissect him as like this real person. Oh, it's weird, right? I think the best way to read him is not actually as like this real person who had beliefs, and like try to go through his Wikipedia page to see, you know, what were his beliefs, but rather imagine him as like almost like a character. Like imagine what he's trying to do rather than what he's saying and what he believes, and to sort of like drill that into the experience of Socrates rather than like the human mortal person himself.
And I think you can correct me if I'm wrong here too, but like what I do really love about the like your grounds for knowledge kind of idea are shakable is, well, that leads into like epistemology as a philosophy, right? In a certain sense of like, yeah, we don't like know. There are some things that we don't know. Like, I think if I were to have a conversation with Socrates and he just kept on questioning me, I would be very happy to be like, oh, I don't know. I don't know, bro. Good question. I'll work on that.
And that's what he wanted. The thing is, like, he wouldn't go out and annoy you because you know the secret sauce. You know how to answer Socrates.
Yeah.
You can just go, I don't know. I don't know. And he would walk away satisfied. And he would target the next person who has like an ego, who thinks they know stuff. That's like those are the people on his radar.
Yeah, and they teach the Socratic questioning method as like a formal way to like teach students. And I've maybe in terms of like specific pedagogical development as a teacher, I'm no longer a teacher, but when I was employed as a teacher, I maybe relied on it too much because, like, in theory, the Socratic method is really good. Like, in theory, like, you systematically poke at your understanding. But the thing is that there are people who are like mouse people who will like crumble under that much pressure, which I think is reasonable because I'm also a mouse person. I like, and I think if you are a philosopher, you can't be a mouse person. I think if you're a scientist, you can be a mouse person, like, personality wise. But I think for philosophy, you like cannot be a mouse person at all. What do you think of that?
I think like I want to believe that's true insofar as like my approach to philosophy has always been very much like a doing of philosophy rather than a speaking of, or rather than a reading of or a thinking of. Is the doing of it that really mattered to me. And that involves very much like many times, oftentimes discussions with other people, dialogues, debates, discussions more generally. And frankly, the way philosophy is structured now, it's like it's weird. It's a weird double-edged thing. Because if you were a mouse person and you wanted to do philosophy, you can get away with it. You can get away with it in the sense that you could go do a degree, maybe even two, having not ever actually like earnestly being challenged or challenging someone, at least verbally, like on the spot. Like that is something you can avoid, but that's not because of philosophy. That's more because of like academic, the winds of academic philosophy and the culture there, like allowing this sort of thing to happen, which I think is not necessarily a bad thing strictly. I think accessibility is one issue, but also like you know, not everyone, I don't think everyone needs to be grilled, you know, live. But I remember vividly, like during my undergrad years, there was I only had one professor who would do this, and I wished all of my other professors did the same, where he would really just, it was probably a room of at most 50 people, but he would just grab someone, not like physically, but like, he would go to someone and go, okay, so what is dreaming? You know, what is this thing? And then they have this dialogue in front of the whole like class with this person. And it was never to like, you know, it was never to belittle the student, because we all had to go. Everyone had to do this, right? So we knew it wasn't just this one person. Oh wow, haha, this guy looks really stupid. He can't answer. He doesn't even know what dreaming is. And then the professor like almost has like this instinct and knows that you're thinking this, and then turns to you and goes, "Okay, you Charis, you tell me what this is." and then you have to start defending yourself. But I enjoyed that so much, and I felt like that was truly the philosophy that I was pursuing. That was the it was not just the okay, here are 10 facts about Plato. Here is, all the here are all the dialogues and what they mean. Oh, here's what Nietzsche said. It's like it was so much more than that. And then like he got fired because they didn't like that he did that.
No.
He got fired right as I graduated. He was like my
No.
supervisor for my paper, and the moment like I was gone, he was gone too. It was crazy.
That's so funny. I love that. I think there's something shared in our academic lineage where like there's this ego hazing that happens in academia, I think. Where I went through the same thing in my experience, in my intro to molecular biology PhD intro course. This old rust and bones dude would gather all of our names in a index. Each one of our names was on an index card, and he would shuffle the index card at the start of every class, and we would go through papers line by line, like literally sentence by sentence, and he would call on a different person, explain that sentence to me, interpret that sentence to me. And it was
cool.
terrifying. Yeah, it was awesome though, because what happened is that like when you get challenged in that way as a mouse person, I'm speaking as a mouse person, when you get challenged in that kind of way, it's kind of like exposure therapy where like your ego doesn't immediately collapse when, the world exists after you've been called out on not knowing anything, right? Like I was a middle performing student, so I never got chewed out that hard, but I got chewed out occasionally for not like having a rigorous understanding of every line of the paper. I even got told like, "Oh, did you even like read the paper?" I'm like, "I did read the paper. It took me 8 hours. I'm just stupid." But like I think for nice people, you wake up the next morning, you're still alive, right? You survive the ego hazing, and you're like, well, I'm not dead. I think that's important, like for two reasons. Like one, your ego has to be appropriate, right? You have to be humbled because going into graduate school or going into many, I'm sure there are plenty of people in this audience who are like, I graduated top 10% of my class or whatever, but the ceiling is like real high, and to be humbled, like that, like to be thoroughly humbled, not just like regular humbled, but like, oh God, I am pretty average, and I should not expect to work less than my peers because I am pretty average, is really important to develop that sense of humility, I think, which humility is something you know all about, right?
I think it is definitely like as you say, right, the exposure therapy of it is so important. Even as like I don't think of myself as a mouse person. Like I think ever since I was, in my formative years, I loved yapping. I loved like doing stage plays. I loved like giving speeches. I remember doing my graduation speech and like, having a lot of fun with that. And I loved like being in front of an audience and like talking and having the spotlight on me. And even then I was still scared when I was picked on because it wasn't like, there's a big difference between like, I guess, being shown the spotlight when you're prepared for it versus when like you don't know what's going to happen. Like that is super scary. It's genuinely the anxiety of like, what will happen? I don't know this question. And I think like the Socratic method puts you in that anxiety. It puts you in that position. And that while I've sang my praises of Socrates and the Socratic method and all that, at the end of the day, it's a method. And it very much, I think the method or whether or not the employment of it is effective or good or what have you depends entirely on the educational goals and like the educator themselves, right? Like I think there was a comment earlier, I think by Xbox, that was like I do have concerns over the Socratic method being exploited to create questions that can never reach a terminus that are applied to personhood and all it entails. So I think like at the end of the day, it is just a method. Meaning if someone has bad intentions and really just wants to like cause undue stress and harm to someone else, and that was their only goal, they just wanted to, hurt somebody, yeah, they could use the Socratic method to like hurt people. But like it's, how should I put this? I think it's one, necessarily not something we pin on Socrates, but two, also it's important to be under duress. Not just because, I'm not saying, if you were put under duress by some horrible, mean asshole philosophy major, who's in their like second year and thought they knew everything, and it was just going around with the Socratic method, trying to like ask people, what do you actually know though? Are you even a real person? And then like maybe invalidating who the people that their interlocutors, right? Like you in the real world, people will do that, and it sucks that people will do that because people are mean, but they shouldn't be mean. But I think it is very important to know what to do when you don't know what to do.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
the way
It's
I would say that.
the teaching aspect is really important because again, I overused the method because I found it so useful as a teacher to diagnose where students were having trouble, right? Because if I can, I remember this is like a shocking thing to admit, but there was a student who like didn't know how RNA worked as like a second year biology major, which was really scary for me because after you have your intro bio class, you should know a lot about RNA at that point. But the student had like no idea. And the Socratic method was useful for me to go like, okay, I don't know where your understanding broke. And the Socratic questioning is supposed to teach me where you are lacking, like what the disconnect is here. Because you can say, I don't understand this, but I need more information than that. So I would, do some of that method, but I would overuse it as JS is saying, like that kind of questioning can be very stressful for students. And I'm of two minds. One, I overdid it because not all of the situations called for the Socratic method. And two, again, with the exposure therapy thing, I think it made me more confident because over time I started getting called out, the fear of getting blasted, and also the confidence that I would survive getting blasted. That's the only way. Well, that's one of the ways that you can establish a kind of confidence in your own voice, right? Because you start off by getting told that you're wrong a lot. And then if you are paying attention, that stops happening as often. It's never going to stop completely. But if you can survive the initial like, ego hit for being wrong and feeling bad about being wrong, you come to realize that your hard work will pay off. Like you will finish your classes, you will graduate, you will have learned a thing or two, and your opinion will become something that people can respect. But it doesn't happen overnight, and you have to be willing to like take an L to develop that kind of skin. Because you watched my stream from before. If you did, like these scientists call you little pondists, like they're so like mean occasionally. And when people are very passionate, especially in the field of science, right, it pays to learn how, like if you want to, okay, so how do I become more confident? It's kind of paradoxical. It's exposure therapy, right? The only way that you learn to be confident from my perspective is to survive situations where your confidence is challenged. And you might not survive every instance, but if you keep on doing it, it's like any muscle, right? And you have a level of plasticity in your brain, the ability to learn, evolve, and adapt. And you just have to trust that you can do that. And I don't have a problem with that because as a neuroscientist, a neurobiologist, I'm like, of course I know that the brain is flexible, like theoretically. But you have to internalize the belief that you are a Homo sapiens who has the capacity to learn. And if you fail 100 times, you're going to pick something up eventually. Yeah.
I do find that I'm in complete total agreement, but I'm also kind of I'm like almost a little sympathetic to the mouse person, and I think you can
I am
add
too
to this if you think it's relevant.
Yeah.
Where like I think it's almost as if when they for example get to the uni classroom, like bringing your old student up as an example, right? When that was probably likely depending on where they're from, the first time in their life they've been questioned that way, right? The first time in their life where it's like they didn't know everything, because like there's a certain like as you go through your schooling, the people who are more academically inclined are gradually filtered out, and if you get to an undergraduate level, what's more likely is that you're probably somewhat literate and you were maybe top of your class in high school or whatever, and you thought you knew everything, and that like that knowing of the things was what made you a not a good person, but like almost like a valuable person, right? Oh, you got into this really good school, or your grades, you achieved these perfect grades, and that's why you're a good student, right? That's what makes you good, is because you knew everything. And then when you get to uni, some people, because they've been so good for so long, they don't realize they haven't learned how to cope with failure yet. They haven't learned how to cope with not knowing something yet at the moment and panicking, going like, oh no, I'm freaking out because it's like this wasn't in the textbook. How was I supposed to know this if it wasn't like mama birded to me? How am I supposed to know this if it wasn't just clearly explained? And like this got to a point where in my like undergrad experience, for example, some people genuinely complained that the material was too hard to the lecturer. They were like, "This is unreasonable that you're asking us to read this Platonic
Oh
dialogue
my
in a
God.
week. That's only like 20 pages, by the way, and like and to ask us questions because it's like I don't know these questions. Like you should have given us more time." And it's like, no, you are asked these questions because the lecturer wants you to think about what's going on. They want you to like not know. They want you to look at the paper that you read and go, actually, I don't know what they were saying at all. I'm gonna have to read this again and again and again and over and over and over again. My professor specifically, I think, had this quote that he repeated a lot, where he said like, "Don't worry, you're not gonna understand Plato even after you pass this course. You might start understanding him in like 10 years, and that's fine."
I love that. I taught pre-meds my entire teaching career. It's the exact same. We're like, this is too hard. I'm like, okay, first of all, you gotta know. I'm sorry, you have to know how the citric acid cycle works. Even if you want to be a doctor, you might not use it, but like it's kind of like filtering for skill issues, right? Like if you can force yourself to learn the citric acid cycle, you can do medical school. Like that's part of it, right? Like they don't want to teach you medically relevant information in college because you don't need it yet. You're not going to be trusted to do the job of a doctor when you are an undergraduate unless you are in one of these fancy programs. But like learning the TCA cycle is important for certain kinds of doctors, but it's also there as a challenge for you. And the thing is I've said this multiple times. I don't know if you were there for stream, but like I view myself as a pretty aggressively average, middle of the bell curve intelligence person. And if I can do it, chances are you can do it too, right? Of course, not everybody can, but chances are pretty good if you put in as much elbow grease as I did, then you can do some of this more complicated thinking as well. Because we're Homo sapiens, right? We share an overwhelming amount of our DNA. If you want to be deterministic about biology and how that relates to your ability to learn, we are all more similar than we are different. So like part of that pedagogy is that like when you get to that point, to try to disentangle your ego from your value as a person from your ability to do things effortlessly. Because like, people like Dr. K have talked about like the burnt out gifted kid thing, so I'm not going to reiterate too many of those points, but it's like one of the hardest things that I had to do was when I stopped being pre-med, I also had a crisis of ego, because I viewed myself as I had identified as like a future doctor for an obnoxiously long amount of time. It was insufferable, right? As not a lot, but as some pre-meds are, like an over-identification of a singular purpose tied to a job. And when I dropped being pre-med, I was like, oh my God, am I even like a valuable, good person anymore? And I think I am nowadays, right? But like, you're so right in the sense of like that first time you get called out for not having done enough work is like, it's scary. And some people do fall very hard from there because it's a very high peak of ego that they found themselves staring down at. But I think it's like, Avatar season 3, Zuko's redemption arc, where he's just like been beaten down for 3 seasons and then he has this epic like growth spurt. But he needed to do that first 3 seasons and toil with his humanity and flaws to be like reborn as this hero. And I think anybody can do that. I think, in my opinion.
Absolutely, I think there's no doubt that like generally, even if you want, if one wants to go to the angle like, oh no, but like I'm just not a smart kid. I was labeled as a stupid kid in my youth or whatever. Like that doesn't mean you can't do more than you're doing right now, because that's the goal. The goal isn't like you need to be as good or you need to do this one task as efficiently as somebody else. It's the goal, or at least I think, right? The educational goal, some of it should be, and I guess it ties into pedagogy, right? To improve upon yourself, right? To do more than what you thought was possible, to do more than what you told yourself you were able to do, to challenge that boundary and to push beyond it. Like, the Socratic method is good. It's good in like getting people to be in that position of anxiety, which I think is necessary for this change, this growing beyond oneself. But I think it also ultimately needs to be accompanied by like a deeper sense of reassurance and love. Like I think like this deeper sense of like everything's gonna be okay, right? Like you're not gonna, just because you don't know this doesn't mean you're now like a worse person, or like you have failed everything and you're gonna like not achieve or amount to anything. Like that's not true at all. But it's easy to think that because like this is a system that prioritizes results, that prioritizes like certain academic standings that are defined very much by like grade boundaries and not like, you know, how much a person's improved or whatever.
Yeah, and I want to add that I'm not. Yeah, I agree. It's not easy to disentangle. It was like I had like a whole freaking like meltdown. I had a meltdown. I was like, oh my god, what am I gonna do? Who am I? But yeah, I think it's interesting. I to accompany. The thing is that there's only so much that a teacher can do to do that part. Some of it is really like, you know, we were talking about philosophy that sedates, right? I think looking on like where does agency begin and end? I think the teacher does like in my very first conversation with Charis, I told him straight up in our private conversation that I think of philosophy as both the most useful thing that somebody can learn and also the most useless. And I've been kind of developing that kind of idea in my head. Like, why do I feel that philosophy is so dangerous and powerful, but also incredibly useless? And I think you had brought it up earlier in stream where you had just said that like the reason why this is philosophy is because it's useless or something. So you said something like that earlier today. And I think it's really interesting. There's like dichotomy. There's like two-facedness of philosophy where, yeah, you could go your entire life without reading Plato, without reading Socrates, you know, without reading Nietzsche and be fine, right? Arguably fine. And in some degrees, there's like a part of me that's like philosophy is just for sad boys, and I'm a sad boy, and I don't want to extrapolate, but I'm guessing you're also a sad boy, right? Like philosophy is just for sad boy stream, sad boy, sad girls. Like this is what philosophy was built for. Is like, I think the pensive emoji is so perfect for all of philosophy because if you were a normal happy person, you wouldn't think about what happiness is. You would just be happy, right? If you knew what happiness was, you just be happy. But since you're a philosopher and you're a sad boy, you think about it too much. And that's very, you know, there's variable usefulness in that, right? Yeah, exactly.
I do think like
so good.
Philosophy is inherently like, maybe not like unhappiness, but philosophy is inherently like shaking the stability of it all. And I think like the stability of it all is what you need to like to be happy in a sort of maybe the traditional understanding of the word. And you can get all very technical and philosophical about it, of course you can, but when you do that, it's like, why are you doing that? Are you doing that because, you know, for the love of the game truly, or is it like, what is it? And if you are doing it for the love of the game, is it because you don't love, you know, everything else that you have to go into this philosophical thinking and query? And you're right in some sense, and that like I have the hunch as well that people don't think philosophically if they're content.
Yeah.
Right. If it's like everything's good, okay, why would you need to think philosophically if everything's good and fine? You should be enjoying it, right?
Yeah, you should be. You are lucky if you are content with your life. You're lucky. Why bother thinking about how to live a good life if you are living a good life, right? But that's why I think it's like for a certain number of people, philosophy is utterly useless because I think philosophy for me is about filling in the gaps that science cannot fill in, right? There are things that are, it's not like, oh, when we have the technology, we'll find out what the meaning of life is. No, that's not true, right? The meaning of life is squishy and something for philosophers to think about because there's no practical answer. And the world of science is divorced from that kind of it's rude to call it arbitrariness because it's important for like the human experience, right? What is life? You know, the idea of this stream, which is just bait because I don't actually want to talk about what is life because I already did that in my giant virus video. But the idea of like philosophy fills in the gaps that cannot have experimentally validated results, right? But I don't think it means it's not important because, as I was saying, in terms of like self-actualization for students who, and I know that there are a lot of you out there, especially my pre-meds out there who grew up gifted the entire time, going to be a doctor, burned out, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I think philosophy is genuinely a way to crawl back out of that burnt out state of being. It is a way to fill in the gap of having your ego malformed and integrated in your capitalistic worth for so long, as I have had for many years of my own life. Part of that is not your fault because capitalism suffocates everybody, and you know, I can buy an iPhone, but I'm not happy, right? Like there's that disconnect that technology and capitalism causes in people, and I think one way is therapy. And then another way is philosophy. Those two things are like related, but I think distinct. And I think like this is not the burnt out gifted kid stream, but I just wanted to point out one of the reasons why I personally love philosophy is that it does have methods to interrogate the unanswerable, which is kind of what my abiogenesis video is about, right? It's about epistemology. How do you answer questions that are not answerable? How do you crawl yourself out of nihilism? You know, therapy can do it, but therapy, I think, comes from it at a different angle, whereas philosophy starts inside your own brain and goes outward, whereas I think therapy comes from outward and then does a loop-de-loop in your head. Does that make any sense to you? I've been meaning to talk to you about this idea for a while.
That's so interesting. That's an interesting take because I know for sure my fellow philosophers some of my fellow philosophers who would vehemently disagree with the idea that like it starts in the brain, because they were like, no, actually it starts in the world that exists and then that's its own thing, right? Like existence and essence and all of that. Like I think it's I think you're right. I think it does start it does start internally. Like I think philosophy is subject, or at least truth is subjectivity, and like, you know, there's a whole thing that comes out of it that I'm not going to go into. Philosophy to me, why I think like I enjoy philosophy to some extent, right, is because it is very much the thing that makes me human. I think like it's what separates me from like a clump of meat.
Let's go.
Or like in cells, like that's what makes me a human being. It's not the fact that I resemble or look a particular way, not that I sound a particular way, not that I type a particular way, because you know all these things can nowadays be generated, and that's a whole other topic as well. But like what makes us human is the pensive face. It's the struggling, it's the going like, but what is it? It's the anxiety, it's the excitement, it's the passion for not knowing things, and the possibility of possibility. Like that's the whole basket, right? That's why I do philosophy, at least, and that's what makes me different from just like some robot. It makes me different from a clump of cells. It makes me different from a plant. You know, like that's what makes me different.
You have the capacity to be pensive face.
And that's why we should all be, in conclusion, we should all be pensive face, because
unless you don't need to be pensive face, don't willingly take on pensive face. If you happen to be hyper adapted to modern capitalism and don't feel that you have been disconnected from your labor in any kind of way, you do you, man. This is not for you.
I think okay, I don't know if I would say you do you. I would look at a person like that and I would think this is a clump of cells. Like I would think like, this is a mech. This is a mech, like a biomech suit, and there's no pilot. Like right now, that's what I would say.
Technically, I am a clump of cells. I am fine and neutral after all.
Right, but it's like we are that and more because of our capacity to pensive face. And if this person has like not even the capacity to pensive face, then I'm like, okay, that's is this even a real person? Is this a robot that's been sent back in time to impersonate human beings?
Are you aware
the
of
inevitable collapse of everything?
Are you aware of the term psychological mindedness?
Psychological mindedness? No, could you explain that to me?
Yeah, it's a term. I could be getting this wrong, but I believe it's a term to describe how reflective a person can be, as if it's like it's a simplification, but it's like a stat that you have that kind of determines your ability for reflection, which I think is interesting because I don't know how rigorous of a metric this is, because I'm not a psychologist or clinical psychologist or any field that actually uses this metric, so it could be controversial. I just don't know that for a fact. I like thinking about it because it does kind of explain some people that I have met who like do you never pensive face? Like do you go home and you don't pensive face? What's it like to live like that? I don't know. As I said before, like I very much identify as someone said it up front in chat, where like sad boy should be a gender neutral term. I think so. I think for some reason, to me, sad boy and sad girl have like different vibes to me, and what I'm specifically referring to is like the sad boy reflective, like 2 a.m. morning walk kind of guy, feel things a lot, like introvert, like not introverted necessarily, but like introspective, kind of sad boy behavior. I identify with that. And it's just because my thoughts are so. There's this line from The Good Place. I don't know if you've seen that show. Oh my god, did you watch The Good Place? It's like the philosophy show for people who don't know anything about philosophy.
It's the one thing that I don't know if I should dip into, because it's like it's squarely in like the pop philosophy camp of like, this is where all the ideas get misinterpreted, but at the same time it is so well known, and it's not like it's all terrible. Like, it's obviously mostly from what I understand, like a really, really good show that's well written and well thought of. But in short, I have read around it, but I've not actually watched it.
So there's a character who is a moral philosophy professor in the show. So the explanation of the philosophy is written through his words, right? And at some point, like, he says that his thoughts are like a garbage disposal that's constantly rattling around, because his attitude towards philosophy is one that is paralyzing, because there is so much to think and reflect upon, and so his like inaction causes this garbage disposal to go around in his head. I'm like, people don't have a constant garbage disposal in their head that is constantly rattling around. Like, what is that like, man? Like, what is it like to not be a sad boy? Like, that's crazy. You can turn
You don't
off
have to
the
be
garbage
sad
disposal.
either. Like, you could be pensive in like a different way, right? Like, but the sad boyness of it is just probably like the, maybe not unifying factor, but like the thing that's strongest. But it's just like that sense of interiority, right? That sense of like, what the asking of the question in your mind, the wondering, the curiosity, the like the reflection, the all of it that's like encompassed in what I think is just such a, like, this has to be a human experience, right? Like, and then occasionally you'll see some people who look like they've never had that, and like, it's interesting. It's so
I
strange the way it happens.
genuinely don't know if it is like, this idea of psychological mindedness where it's like a capacity to reflect, or if it's like a rejection of the effect, right? Because I've been thinking like, is the absence of sad boy a rejection of traveling into that space? Like, they can kind of feel that they're entering into sad boy territory, and then there's some psychological defense mechanism that goes, nope, we're not doing that today. Or is it genuinely like they cannot like conjure the sad boy? I think it's interesting to think about, and I don't really know, because it's just an idle thought, so I don't want anybody to parrot what I'm saying here. It's just out loud thinking, because again, I don't know how well reflected psychological mindedness is as a idea. I want to believe that it's true, but I don't want to speak too authoritatively on anything that I don't have a degree in. Put it that way.
So the way I'm conceiving of this psychological mindfulness is your ability to, or the sad boy within you's capability to to take over and basically to take control. Because I think there's a sad boy in everyone, and I think when there's no, if we were to think of it from the framework of psychological mindfulness, people who don't display that, it's merely like that they don't display it. It's not like it's not there.
That's
I feel
true.
as though people
That's true.
can probably, most likely, on the basis of me having done zero biology or psychology ever, I think people have the capacity for it. And it's oftentimes, at least in my experience, at least from the people I've talked to, who, at first initially it seems like they have no thought, head empty, right? But then as I've gotten to know them, it's like, no, it's not that there's no thought. That whenever there is such a thought that is discomforting, they shy away from it for one reason or another. And I'm oftentimes not like critical in like no, you should start thinking now, right? Like, and then grabbing them by the shirt collar. It's not that. It's more like I'm genuinely, earnestly trying to sympathize, right? To see where it's coming from,
Yeah.
to help this person out of that like existential paralysis. Because I feel like that's my job, not as like a philosopher, but my job as like a VTuber, I guess, is actually to help people out of the paralysis of anxiety, of like not knowing what's going on, like the existential dread of it all and being stuck. Like, I think it's normal to be stuck. It's normal to be so afraid of it that you don't ever want to venture into it. That's fine. And like, that's why I'm here to help you.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you put it that way, because I think that was a good counterbalance to what I was saying, because I think I may have come across as like a very detached researcher, and I was, right? Because I'm thinking about this metric. I'm like, oh, do people display this? Do they not? What does it mean? But I think it is very human and good skepticism to go, okay, maybe they don't display it in where a metric like psychological mindedness can capture, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It just means that it's not captured by the test, which is rigorous. And I'll take the tiny L. I'll take the tiny L on it, because I agree with you. I'll take the tiny L that maybe I was a little presumptuous there. JSR says, sad boy and everyone is plausible. It might take a big shock to force some people into it. And like, if you don't ever have to be forced into it, I think like that's also the difference between you and me, is that like, I don't want to help people out of it necessarily, like one-on-one, in that like engaged kind of way that you potentially do. Not to say that I'm not promising that Charis will solve your problems, right? But if you want your ideas,
okay, I'll promise that I'll solve all your problems.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that, but you can do that all you want. I'm not going to make that promise for you, but if you want to promise that, it's totally fine by me.
Sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, but like I talking about theory and stuff is fun for me, because when I hear theory, my natural instinct is to play with those ideas. But when you were talking about philosophy that sedates, I wonder to what degree, because I'm only aware of my own engagement in philosophy, and when there was this podcast that I listened to. I forget what it was called, but every episode was a different philosopher. And I found that most of the episodes were sedating. Like, I thought about them, I listened to them passively, and I just like didn't think about them ever again. Except Nietzsche. I really enjoyed the episode on Nietzsche and his thoughts on nihilism and meaning and context-dependent morality. I thought that was all really interesting. It stuck with me, right? So I think philosophy is this like very personalized journey, and I'm wondering if I can turn back the assumption that content is sedating back onto you, in terms of like, I am proof to some degree that when I hear philosophy that registers with me, that I am going to critically engage with it, that I am going to sit and talk about Nietzsche and really incorporate Nietzsche as a part of my own, what do I want to say? Ethos, I should say. But I'm wondering if you think that is sufficient. Like, I watched, listened to a Nietzsche podcast, and it changed my life, changed the way that I viewed things. Would you say that that is still sedating because there's no counterbalance to it? Or do you think that that is sufficient, that I didn't read the books myself, that I got it chewed up secondhand, mama burned it into my mouth, but it did change me?
I mean, I don't think there is such a thing as like sufficient, insofar as like, sufficient to what end, right? Like, what counts as sufficient, right? Like, is it like someone who's thought maximally about everything from both sides? Because I think like maybe the comparison I would draw is like between someone who knows like everything about a debate, a particular controversial issue, politically nowadays, and knows all the facts, right? And can argue, knows all the arguments on one side and the other, and understands how to navigate this issue, this difficulty, with like a precision that is unique, maybe not unique, but like extraordinarily like, proficient, right? But this person has no stake in the argument. They themselves are not involved in the issue at all whatsoever. They merely are like this bystander who is versed in like the knowledge of it, maybe, right? They're versed in the knowing of it, but they've never participated in it themselves. Not just like by participating in debate, but like by truly like having that issue or that particular like instance of human existence intertwine with their own existence, right? Like, I think it's not so much that it's insufficient that you've only watched like a podcast of Nietzsche once, and I'm like, no, but you didn't read the books. Like, frankly, I haven't read all the books yet either, so I'd be a hypocrite if I said that, right? But it's more so like, to what end do you think you're doing it for? Like, do you want to get into philosophy, not like you specifically, Five, but just like, in general, like a question I would pose to people, right? It's like, do you want to get into philosophy the way people get into like astrology? Like, what is it that you desire? Like, are you looking for some thinker or some like branch of thought, some ism that perfectly like explains the way you are as a person and like the way you make decisions, so that the next time you have to have those sad boy thoughts, you go, oh no, it's because I'm a utilitarian, and then you just move on, right? And then the thought just exits because you have that like label, that confirmation that like, yes, it's because I'm a pragmatist, it's because I'm a Hegelian, like it's because I'm the thing, and you know, to me as well, and I'm going to punch myself here, it's because I'm a Kierkegaardian, right? It's because I'm an existentialist. No, like what, to what end are you thinking of philosophy for? Because if it's just that, it's pretty easy. Like you really do just have to watch like a podcast or even like read an article, and then just like do like a BuzzFeed quiz where it's like, you know, instead of what's your garlic bread, it's like what's your philosopher. It's literally the same quiz. It's just questions, and then it matches you with like a name or a word, and perhaps potentially some further reading that you and I both know you're never going to actually click onto. So it's like if you really want that, it's super easy to get into philosophy. But like to me it seems as though a lot of people are like that, and like when they do or speak of philosophy, when they participate in it, is like they just want a way to explain away their life experiences so that there's some comfort that's brought to them. And comfort is fine, but comfort is not sufficient to me, at least.
So that's interesting on its own. So let me tell you kind of my experience with Nietzsche, and you can tell me if I'm philosophizing enough.
Yeah.
Because I think practicing philosophy, I do that as a science communicator with regards to handling epistemology. I think that is practicing philosophy as a profession, right? Mm-hmm. This abiogenesis video is unwieldy, and it would be irresponsible if I had conveyed it as a series of truths when the nature of truth is so fuzzy, especially around things that happened 4 billion years ago. So I think I'm comfortable with saying that I am doing philosophy by doing that abiogenesis video the way that I think is philosophically and scientifically rigorous. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, I just, you know, it just occurred to me that like my whole rambling just now, like that wasn't directed at you. That
no,
like,
I understand. I understand.
I'm thinking of like a person in my head, almost like a straw man that I'm fighting right now in my head. No, absolutely. I absolutely think that the pursuit, your pursuit in that regard, I think is very, very like it's the right path almost. I don't know if right is the word I would use here, but it's like this is a
consistent with your
that I find
thought.
Interesting. Yeah.
Okay, but I want to. Okay, so that I'm pretty comfortable with because epistemology is a branch of philosophy, and where biology lacks, you have to fill in with philosophy because there's just a hard limit, and I'm comfortable with accepting that. Where I think it's kind of interesting because like the reason why Nietzsche like changed my life in terms of like it is to explain away some of that anxiety and chaos. But then what I'm hearing is that might not, in your straw man, I'm curious as to what sufficient engagement. I know you said that there is no such thing, but in this straw man, what could the straw man do to be a better, less of a BuzzFeed philosopher, right? Because I would say, I would own it, right? Like to me, my relationship with Nietzsche is one where it brings me comfort to know that it's going to sound weird, especially after a video on abiogenesis, but God is dead, right? Like that whole thing of like, but then he twists it around and says, you know, humans are kind of the master of their own destiny, and you have to choose to be good, right? And people choose to be good, you know, all the time, right? And I find that very comforting. The fact that there's evidence around us, you know, that people are nice to people. Not all the time, but people are nice to people. And that's pretty true no matter where you are. Is that generally, if you load up in a random space, there's a chance that those people are capable of goodness. and to me, like the way that he thought about morality as not being so rigid, but rather as being determined by its context, also got rid of a lot of anxiety. Like, what is right, what is wrong? Nietzsche's going, well, I mean, it depends on how much money you were born with to a certain degree, what right and what wrong was. And I said, you know, that does make sense. And that is a model of the universe and the way that people act that I see support for. So it relieves a kind of anxiety where I'm not entirely sure how to interpret the madness, the chaos, the sad boyness of the world around me. But, when I think about what Nietzsche said, it makes sense to me. But I'm hearing that that's maybe a bit of the BuzzFeed philosophy. And I'm wondering kind of where you draw those lines.
I think it's not so much like no, or I suppose I did mean to like poke and prod in some sense, but like everyone engages with philosophy. Like people you don't have to have the internet or like read a book or be in a philosophy class or be in a lecture or watch a Charis from a stream to be exposed to philosophy and this is what makes philosophy very different from like all the other disciplines, right? Philosophy as arguably the first discipline to be like studied at all rigorously and like as such as sort of like almost the grandfather of like any sort of thought and all of that, right? Like everyone engages with philosophy or philosophical issues or issues that we would currently right now classify as philosophical. This is not just right now, present day, but also like throughout history. And anything that we could concretely determine through some largely agreed upon objective like means, right? We have just sort of sliced off like the definition of philosophy. So philosophers of was it philosophers of nature? Was it philosophers of what were they called? Like natural philosophers. Yeah. Later then became scientists. Whatever, like discourses specifically about this framework of government and power. Okay, well that's politics now, right? Like, whereas like it's not like, oh, because these have all been solved, it's not philosophy anymore. But it's more like, okay, we can now agree that this is the field that we should engage in, and these are the things we're generally all in agreement of. For example, the scientific method we're all in agreement with, inferences and certain assumptions one makes in their theory of knowledge, their epistemology, right? Is necessary to participate in those fields and spaces. And I think like everything is philosophy, so it's not so everyone is to some extent engaging with it. Now, when I say like BuzzFeed philosophy, or maybe when I bring up the BuzzFeed "What is your garlic bread" example, what I mean is I would say that you should be disappointed if all you realized you wanted was to go on a quiz or whatever, or read a few articles and go, oh, my thinking throughout my life most closely resembled this thinker or this idea, and because of that, that's who I am. Okay, and then you like just don't ever engage with that at all. You don't ask yourself why you do this. You don't ponder where it's from. You don't ponder beyond yourself. Like I would say that doesn't make you like an ignorant troglodyte or whatever, but it certainly would not make you a philosopher, and not everyone has to be a philosopher. Like I guess is probably the biggest thing. Is like I don't think everyone needs to be a philosopher. I think it's fun. I think everyone should do a little bit of philosophy, but the should is an odd statement that is like very, very much embedded within my like views of the world and all of that, and how I have an optimistic general outlook on like the capacity for everyone to engage philosophically, and not just engage philosophically in like being asked questions like Socrates, but engage philosophically because they have the means to, right? They can afford to spare some time just sitting there and being all sad boy, like, because not everyone can like afford that, right? Can afford to just sit there and think about what the hell is going on with the world and everything, right? They just have to. A lot of people have to work, right? So
that I mean, it kind of wants me to. It kind of brings me back to this idea of unmet need. But first, I'm going to say that like, oh, I wish I had written this down. What was I going to say? BuzzFeed. Okay, so would you define adequate engagement with philosophy to your liking? Charis Euphranor approved, and not necessarily right or wrong, but Charis Euphranor approved, right? Would you define that as a constant state of epistemological anxiety, like this idea that to practice in a way that you approve of, it's like you always need to be a little unsure and curious? Is that kind of what that sums up to?
Ooh, I like that. I you put it better than I could have put it, because I was gonna say something along the lines of like, so long as it ends in a question mark.
I think,
but I think
that's good
like
too.
that's
Yeah. No,
that's like what I would say is the way one should approach the world. Yeah.
Given the means, and given that it is enriching, right? Because again, I think there are
of course,
people who don't care, and thinking about Nietzsche will not make their life better. But if you do, but that's why I think of philosophy as being kind of a way to have an unmet need, which is also why I describe it as one of the most dangerous disciplines, right? Because philosophy, in a way, I think is like professional gaslighting. Every which way, right? It doesn't matter. Whatever your agenda is, you're being gaslit by these philosophers, which can be good, can be bad, right? But like, you know, as much as it pains me to say, and I don't want to speak the name out loud, but there is a feature on one of your recent thumbnails about the male loneliness epidemic.
Yes.
And that person on that thumbnail could be described as a philosopher. Has a philosophy, right? It might not be a rigorous philosophy, but it has a particular view of the world and how it works. And that philosophy is appealing to a certain type of person, right? Voldemort, right? Voldemort. You had Voldemort. You had YouTube Voldemort, and I will not say his name. I fight you, not me. Okay, like I'm squishy and soft. I don't want to have your angry comments. But the idea being that, like, I think that, you know, everybody who's been on my stream knows that, like, I'm a huge cheerleader for therapy. I'm therapy's biggest mascot. I think therapy is awesome. I did therapy, quite a bit of it. I think for something that isn't, I think the reasons why I went to therapy don't even rank the top 20 of the common reasons people go to therapy, right? I've had a pretty good life. But I did, you know, everybody, even people who have good lives, can find themselves in crises for various reasons. Let's just put it that way. And I think therapy is like hiring an experienced cave diver to come cave dive into your brain and help you to escape the cave that you have built for yourself. And it was invaluable, incredible, and a great therapist. And it takes a while to find a good therapist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I was going to say this for a different stream, but it just, I think this philosophy as unmet need is like a good transition into, like, I think philosophy is not a replacement for therapy. Good heavens, no. Because it's like, it's like giving you, okay, so you're trapped in the cave of your brain. And then by learning a set of philosophies, you are given the tools to do the break yourself, right? You're given a rope, you're given a headlamp, but it's you, right? There's no therapist there to help you with a map or an experienced explorer helping you personally to escape the darkness of your own mind. You just do it on your own. And for some people, that's not the worst, right? But if you like give a stick of dynamite to most people and go like, okay, here's a stick of dynamite in your own brain, that's like not like a great, not everybody's gonna do the good thing. Not everybody's gonna throw the dynamite at the cave that isn't load bearing and then have the whole cave collapse on themselves and really hurt themselves using philosophy. And that's kind of the idea that I've been playing with. Like some I'll just call them like afflictions of the mind, like difficulty that everybody experiences, right? I'm a huge therapy fan because you're hiring a professional to break you out. Philosophy can do the same thing, but I fear it a lot more because it is internal, in my view, whatever your friends, whatever. But for me, the thought, okay, your brain, your mind made from the outside, sure, experiences, whatever. But the thought starts from within you when you are trying to navigate out using philosophy versus therapy, where you've got, it's like co-op. And I wonder what you think about that.
Can I quickly ask you, would you hire a professional philosopher?
I just send you a DM. I don't need to hire anybody.
That's me. That's where that's my place in like the current day economy now. Is like
hey, you're monetized on YouTube, right? You're
yeah, kind of am. I'm not. I need like 300 more subs for ad revenue. Otherwise, it's like just otherwise it's just like the lowly amount of memberships.
Yo, so go subscribe to him right now and help him out with that.
But no, I think like I think very much the idea of dangerous philosophy I think is interesting. And because on the one hand, like you will have people like Voldemort who will espouse a certain belief and rhetoric and like an idea, an ideology, right? Loosely, something at least loosely disguised as an ideology, but in actuality is obviously, a sinister ploy to extract money from vulnerable young boys and men. But otherwise it seems that way, at least, right? It seems to the untrained eye, and that is most people, that there's a little bit of the truth in there. He's saying something. He is a philosopher. We have this urge to call people philosophers when they display certain faculties of like being able to identify an issue and go like, here's the solution. And it doesn't matter what the solution they're saying is. That if you feel heard enough, a lot of people, especially again, younger people and untrained people, will look at that and fall for it, I guess. And the difference between like a philosopher, or maybe not a philosopher per se, but yeah, a philosopher and a scientist, is scientists have like more rigorously like determined boundaries, and it's almost like a badge of honor to be a scientist, right? To contribute to the scientific understanding of the world and the way things are. It is like good. You wouldn't shy away from someone calling you a scientist. Philosophers will shy away from being called philosophers, at least in my understanding of the current climate of everything. Like the only people that would call themselves philosophers are like rappers. And now, I guess, grifters, of all grifters of all sorts.
I just want to stray from like to move away from Voldemort a little bit, just to keep the lines a little cleanly. But you can continue on your point. But let's move away from talking about Voldemort. I just mentioned him in passing to anchor it in some context.
Of course, yeah, and so like the idea that philosophy at all can be dangerous because not all philosophy is good, right? Not all ideology is good. Not all attempts to explain the human experience and all that are rooted in good faith, or at least are rooted in things that are sociable or cohabitable, are consistent with like a peaceful, good, and just society that generally most of the population aims for. There are dangerous and bad philosophies out there. People who do bad things are not necessarily, it's not necessarily because they haven't done philosophy or they haven't thought philosophically. It's oftentimes because they are trapped in a specific philosophy, one that maybe I would disagree upon as a philosopher, or at least as someone who engages with philosophy somewhat academically, or at least I used to, and say that like the issue isn't so much that there are good ideas and bad ideas, because they exist, and people will use bad ideas to justify bad things. It's more so being able to the ability to recognize the good ideas from the bad ones, and what makes the good ideas good and what makes the bad ideas bad, and all of that. And like I don't mean good and bad just in a moral sense. I mean like in an evaluative sense, like in a sense that's like that implores you to think about yourself, I think, is so much more important than the ideas you believe in. I think it's the capacity to be able to examine them.
I think that's fair, and
I don't know if that answers your question.
it kind of reaches around the direct question, but I think that upon reflection, the question itself is posed sort of in a leading kind of way, and not entirely fair. But I think that the thought of this is maybe too complicated for my own head to wrap my. I like philosophy. It's fun and interesting, but it does require a certain level of commitment of brain resources that I'm not trained to have. Because I wanted to say something about ideology and Zizek, but I'm like, I'm not equipped to do that right now. Like the role of
well, I hate philosophy, so that balances us out.
I like philosophy because I get to engage with it casually as like a normal person and not as like a professional. And there's a really interesting question in chat that kind of potentially illustrates the difference of attitudes in philosophy and in science, that I think we talked in our first conversation behind the scenes, so we can kind of reiterate that here. So we have, is there a way to prove the existence of an object either from the perspective of the object or from the observer outside the system of the object? To me, as a biologist, speaking only as myself, this is a question that is not. What did you call it? Like a teapot, not a teapot. Laser gun. What did you say? Like Newton's laser gun or
A
something?
laser gun. Oh, Newton's flaming laser sword.
Oh yeah. Newton's flaming laser sword. Can you explain a little bit about what that
Alder's
idea was?
razor, I think, is what it's called. It's like it's not a it's a philosophical razor, and basically a philosophical razor is a technique people use to, or it's a principle, a rule of thumb, basically, that just refuses to, maybe not refuses. What's like the technical bit is like it eliminates unlikely it eliminates certain explanations that don't fall within something that is worth discussing over, or like maybe not worth, but like something that is probably untrue. And Alder's razor, also known as Newton's flaming laser sword, and like this was named because the author found it really funny to call it that.
It's great.
Why Newton's like laser sword? Well, it's because like it's the foundation of the razor is that if it is not possible to experiment and get a result that determines whether or not the question is, how to answer the question, then it's not worth discussing. Occam's razor is the big one. Yeah, Occam's razor is the different razor. That one just says the least likely. If you're weighing two possibilities, get rid of the one that's less likely.
Yeah, so the reason why it reminds me of Newton's flaming laser sword is like as a biologist, I cannot answer how to rigorously determine the existence of an object, right? What I can say is more like what Decart, I think therefore I am. You perceive an object, it's real to you, so it's real. I don't know, that's not that interesting to me. And even people who hallucinate, who undergo psychosis, their hallucinations, depending on the type of hallucination they have, is real to them. They respond as if they were real to them because their perception of reality has changed. And I don't think it's like biologically an interesting question. You might not have posed the question to me. It might have been for Charis, but I think it's an excellent question of like where I would draw lines of like, well, as putting my science hat on, I'm like, I don't care. Not to say it's a bad question, but speaking as myself as a materialist biologist, I'm like, that's the kind of question where I'm like, don't really care. you think therefore you am
compelled to answer it, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter to you if you know the answer to that question because it doesn't affect what you do anyways. Am I getting that correctly?
Yeah. Like it doesn't influence any of the experiments I would design. It doesn't really influence the way that I would cover material in my new job here. It doesn't have any material impact on the way that I would think. Because, and like, it's not quite Newton's flaming laser sword. Now that I've heard you say it again, it's not quite the same thing, but it does like narrow down, because I think there's something in science that you get trained to do, and not to say that I'm the best at it, but something that you will be trained to do is how to ask good, meaningful questions, and in parentheses, the kind that gets you funded. So, I mean, philosophy is a bit different in the sense where unanswered questions, no matter how much they have a return on investment, are still worth doing for humanity's sake. At least that's how I see it.
You're like kind of, I think you're basically, hold on, let me think about this. I also don't care if whatever's in front of me is real, in the sense that like philosophers are not like one unit. There are a lot of like subfields in philosophy, and people are very, very adamantly like, especially in now the academic trends of now, the trends of academia nowadays, right? You are encouraged to specialize, you're encouraged to be in one field, and frankly you're encouraged to stay in your own lane, even in something like philosophy where it's like you would think traditionally it's more of a broadly thought of as all-encompassing discipline, and it might be, but you very quickly are like shepherded into like one or two subfields and like very, very specific super interesting but ultimately very niche like ideas on very, very specific topics. And so when I say I don't care, what I mean is like I did not specialize in epistemology and in like asking, okay, how do I prove the thing in front of me is real? But I do care in the sense that like I think the question is important because it's one of the questions you can use to almost like I guess ground yourself, to like ask yourself, okay, like where do I stand truly in anything? When you bring up Descartes, so that tells me I get the I get to go to like to, like yap about it for a little bit.
Yeah. Go
Like
ahead.
Descartes is the 101. He's the 101 for pretty much most like undergrad or even like high school like philosophy classes. Because it's not because it was the first thing chronologically that's ever been thought. Because this was in the what was it? I'm not a history major. This was like in the 1600s, I think 1700s when this was when Descartes was around and his meditations were around and that was where it came from. Not like thousands of years ago with Plato. Why don't we start with Plato? And now some classes do, but I would argue that those classes are. I would argue that we should start with Descartes. Like it's a good idea to start with Descartes because Descartes poses the question, like how do we know anything? Not in a Socratic way, but in like a almost in a stronger way than Socrates ever did. Like he formulated it in such a way that is so gripping that is like I guess the foundations of like skepticism. And nobody is actually a skeptic. Like nobody in philosophy is actually like exactly. No one's actually a solipsist. No one in the sense that like it's very unpopular. Like if you walk in with a PhD proposal, going like here's my defense of skepticism, people are going to raise some eyebrows, right? So it's not it doesn't really happen, but we teach it and it's so important to teach because answering skepticism, how we approach the problem of skepticism is almost like the way most isms, most thoughts, most philosophies, most anythings start, right? To go back on like maybe the epistemology that we tried to get into a bit earlier, what maybe I thought would be the best way I could contribute to the discussion of it is really to highlight that epistemology, I would argue at least, is fundamentally how we answer the skepticism question. Like how do we answer the question that, okay, let's say you see everything in front of you, your computer screen or your phone, wherever you're watching this from, right? And you're hearing these things through your headphones or maybe just through your speakers, what have you, all of your sensory experiences. They could be illusory, or at least you could be dreaming. Let me ask you this, right? How do you know you're not dreaming right now?
I don't. It's one of these questions that I'm not interested in. I don't know. I don't know that I'm not dreaming. I haven't.
We've all dreamed before, right?
Yeah. It's like I live my life as if I am not dreaming because I believe that if I lived as if I were dreaming, it would be the end of my dream. I don't know that, but I believe it to be true, which I think we'll probably talk a little bit about the composition of belief in just a little bit, because that was a whole lot of my like intellectual humility soapbox in the video. I think it's interesting hearing you talk about Descartes in a way that is a little more than the 101, which is, what I was referring to, right? Would you say that like Socrates is like top down epistemology and then Descartes is bottom up epistemology, if we're talking about complexity?
Ooh, top down, bottom up. That's really interesting.
Because Socrates is out here being like a debate bro and like, do you know anything? And Descartes like, well, like what has to be true for us to know anything? And it feels like it's squeezing on epistemology on two different angles.
The really short answer is yes. the medium answer, if you'll allow me, is Plato's or Socrates, which is told through Plato, right? Socrates as the character, as the person, and his teachings and all that, his thoughts were as told by Plato. It lends to the theory of the Platonic forms, and this was like Plato's actual theory of things, and the way things are was like that there were such things as the forms, and they blah blah, and this is how we know when something's a cow is because there's like not somewhere out there, but rather there is the form of the cow that all particular instances of cows are a bit like, and that's how we know it's a cow. This is like this is just like one example, and he doesn't really use the example of cows. I'm just sort of oversimplifying it here. He uses more like the examples of justice, of love, of virtue, of et cetera, these things, right? He says there are forms of these, and we enact particular instances of them, and the forms, they like, I'm pointing up as if you could see my hands. You can't see my hands right now, but like just imagine I'm pointing up, right? I'm like, the forms up there, right? They are the source of everything that we do and are down here in the particular mortal plane. This is what Plato tries to say through his Socratic dialogue, which has been, super vehemently disagreed upon by many philosophers, and is generally kind of unpopular now. Although Neoplatonism, is a thing, and people talk about it there. I'm not going to get into that, but Descartes was kind of bottom up in the sense that, like, he was very much thinking like, okay, I can't prove that I'm not dreaming. And then he goes a step further in the thought experiment. He's like, okay, I can't even prove that I'm not like a brain in a vat. I'm not a brain in a jar being controlled by this evil scientist or this evil like demon. He says evil demon, but it's easier to think of an evil scientist with a brain in a jar, right? So there's like this evil scientist could be controlling all of my sensory experiences, and like nothing I know is real and it's all a lie. Okay, what can I know if that were the case? Well, I can't know that the cup in front of me is real. I can't know that my sensory perceptions are real, and that there's a chair in front of me, or there's light in my eyes, or I'm drinking water into my mouth. I can't know any of that. But what I can know, the one thing I can know, is I exist. Because if I didn't exist, I wouldn't be able to like ask the question. Some formulation of me has to exist, this self, right? And that's cogito ergo sum, right? That's the I think, therefore I am. It's because I can ask the question. I know that under the most extreme forms of doubt and skepticism, at least I know that I still exist. And then what Descartes tries to do with his thing is he tries to build it from that bottom up. He tries to like go, okay, well, if I know I'm real, then, and he like, makes a bunch of conjectures, and frankly, no one's in philosophy is too interested in the things that follow after it. This is like kind of the main, the meat of it, I guess. But yeah, it is very like almost top down, bottom up. Yeah.
I think like it's interesting to think about if we're talking about like BuzzFeed philosophism, right? It's just like, I don't know. I'm not here to police how people think about anything, right? I only am aware of how I think of things, and things make sense to me. And I think, I had a biology professor, a fellow on to discuss Jean Berth, who did philosophy as an undergraduate, and she had like a very interesting take that I largely agree with. I think if you like philosophy, if you like philosophy and you're a scientist, I think you tend towards materialism as just kind of an epistemic framework, but that's just what it is, right? Apart from I think, therefore I am, you build everything else off of shaky epistemological truths or not truths. And the way that you can tell if you're right or wrong is you can't. And the best that you can do is you make predictions that are either more consistent with the data that you collect or less consistent with the data you collect. And that, I think, is deeply uncomfortable for a lot of people. Because that's not true, that's not false. That is, people called it in the comments Bayesian philosophy or something, like statistical philosophy. And I think that most accurately reflects the way that I think about reality. Like this idea of, if we can't know, the only thing that we can know is I think, therefore I am. And everything else, there is no hard truth. And I think the sooner you accept that, the easier, the less oppressive uncertainty gets. At least from me, as I am grappling with that kind of idea.
Yeah.
Should we?
I just wanted to say yes. That's absolutely it.
So true, bestie.
For epistemology, yeah, so true, bestie. That's the approach of epistemology. Yeah.
We want to talk about beliefs.
Ooh.
So,
I believe I do.
Yeah. Ooh, there you go. We have fun here. We have fun here on the Find the Neutral channel. So belief for me is a really big deal because I had a Reddit atheist neckbeard kind of phase where I thought I was smarter than everybody. Quickly humbled, going through rigorous academic training that, there's more to life than being a Reddit atheist, or Redditor in general. Like, I dunk on Redditors all the time, but with love, because I was there too, right?
I still am there, so I also dunk on you in love.
You're a professional redditor, though. I think, like, I think philosophy is professional redditism.
No. There's a joke now in my community that like the Reddit mod video that's come out. Have you seen the Reddit
Yeah,
mod video?
I did.
It's like that's me. That's just how I. That's just how I am. No, sorry. I derailed you for a bit. Yes, Reddit atheism.
I will say, just addressing chat, like I typically do reach out a lot more, but when I have a guest, I tend to converse solely with a guest. But I will point out a comment here. Logic is based on observation and the rule of the universe. Thus, statistics must be what we base our philosophy upon. I think like must is like I'm being as careful as humanly possible when I am talking about true and false, right? Do you like when I say true and false, I'm talking about 0 and 1, right? Like in a computer, right? Either the circuit is on or it's off, and there's no nuance or in between. So when I see language about like must, oh, you didn't even say the word must. I just kind of inserted that in my own head. Well, in any case, that's just my soapbox opinion of like, you technically can't call people wrong in the majority of cases. Technically, if you want to be as rigorous as humanly possible, you can't call them wrong. What you can say is that some of the things that you say are less consistent with evidence as we see it. And then you get into the whole, this transitions into belief thing that, well, what do you believe? Do we all share the same pool of evidence? The answer is obviously no. If you've lived through COVID, we're not going to talk about COVID here, okay? But if you lived through COVID, you know that that belief is complicated because we don't have the same beliefs. B, there's like 1,000 other things that influence what we believe. That's not just the evidence, quote unquote, which is why I went on that tangent in the video of like, trust the science. Well, it's like, well, like technically science is not always right, which is technically true, but it's right in the majority of cases, and it continues to get better, which I got a long comment telling me how I'm wrong about that. I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. Okay. But I can't, if you want to believe that science backslides a lot all the time, I can't, that's just like not an argument I'm willing to have, right? My stance is that over the history of science, progression has been largely in the positive direction. Yes, there were backslides. Yes, there was confusion, but generally it is self-correcting over time. And like, trust the science isn't helpful because there's always some wiggle room of like, well, they were wrong before, why can't they be wrong now? And it's like, well, it's betting, right? There are odds at play. I had this segment in the video, but I cut it out for being too spicy. But since we're on a stream, I can be a little spicy where I'm like, okay, you've been punctured by an arrow. Okay. Do you choose to see Back Alley Bob? Or do you choose to go to a hospital? I can't tell you for certain that the doctor that you see at the hospital didn't fake his way into being a doctor. I can't tell you for certain that the doctor has a weird belief that they're the angel of death and they want you dead. Or I can't guarantee you that. Right? I can't say that Back Alley Bob, maybe Back Alley Bob became Back Alley Bob after medical school. Right, and like fully capable of treating an arrow wound. Like I don't know, but presented with the opportunity, if you had to bet, I'm betting on the hospital. That's what I mean by reality is like so shakeable. I can't tell you, oh, dog, go stupid, go see a doctor, because I wouldn't say that in good faith. What I can say is, you give me $100 to bet on whether or not the person gets better after being shot by an arrow. I'm sorry, Back Alley Bob. I'm not betting on Back Alley Bob.
But it could very much be that, Back Alley Bob wound up there because he was disgraced, but he has a medical license and everything. He was just actually an early adopter of what we nowadays consider advanced, scientific or advanced medical treatment that at the time was shunned by the dogmas and the existing ideologies of the system. And actually, he was really the most well-practiced practitioner
And I can't say that
So you
he's
got
not.
it wrong there.
I can't say that that's false, right? That's what's so frustrating is that life is not that simple. Life is not true, false, black, white, 0, 1. Life is a spectrum of a probability cloud, like the electrons surrounding the nucleus of an atom. A probability cloud. You're just more likely to be here at a certain time frame, less likely to be there in a certain time frame or a certain shape, but there's nothing. I think therefore I am is true. Everything else is meh. So I want to get your take on how much experience you personally have on I guess I don't know how else to better call it, but the epistemology of belief itself, or do you think that ventures into psychology and not philosophy?
What do you mean by belief, and like how do you distinguish it from like epistemology?
Yeah, so let's say that there is objective reality. Let's just say that that exists. Take it for what it is.
Okay.
Belief is the ability for individual humans to make different conclusions given the same evidence. Because I have beliefs, because as I said, apart from I think therefore I am, everything else is a composite because you don't have, I don't know that I'm a brain in a jar, right? I don't know that for a fact, so I can't tell you you're wrong. Much like in the abiogenesis video, I can't tell you that a supernatural origin didn't happen, right? If you want to believe that, I'm actually totally fine with that. The intellectual humility thing that I wanted to point out is that our belief is fallible, like Socrates has pointed out, right? It is imperfect, but it also doesn't come from nowhere, right? There are rational means. The way that I define rationality, by the way, is if you can find reasons, that's rationality. They might not be good reasons, but if they're reasons, aka rational. Logic, I reserve for, I'm sure you've done a bunch of formal logic, right? If then, modus ponens, the A to B.
I'm getting flashbacks.
No, modus tollens, right? Contrapositive, inverse,
Oh man.
Yeah. Like formal logic, people aren't logical in the sense that they do not operate with a functioning understanding of modus tollens in their back pocket in every decision they make, right? There are heuristics that humans use because we are nervous monkeys, and heuristics are faster than thinking, is this statement true because of modus tollens? We just don't do that. So instead, we are rational. We come to conclusions based on evidence that is imperfect, and our reasoning brain is also imperfect, but there are certain beliefs that are more consistent with more evidence, depending on which evidence that you want to incorporate. So I wonder if there's anything that you've stumbled across in trying to dissect what the philosophy of belief itself is. The fact that we can disagree is already interesting, right? Because if we were perfectly logical, we were all shown the same information. A perfectly logical species comes to the same conclusion every time.
Okay. Can I first before I dive into it, can I first ask you, or maybe pause it, maybe show you my what I understand as inference.
Yeah.
Right, as the process of inference. So to me, the process of inference is when you when you extract new information or you synthesize existing things and then come to extract new information from it or new knowledge from it that does not necessarily have to be correct, but is, pragmatically speaking, probably it. So for example, right, if I look out the window and I see that it's raining, I will infer, or maybe I can infer, I don't know if can is the right word to use here, but I infer that my roof is probably wet, right? Because I look outside and it's raining. Okay, my roof is above, it's the uppermost part of the building and it's exposed to the elements. So if it's raining, then the rain will probably hit the roof and the roof will probably be wet, right? And that's me making an inference. Now, it could be the case that actually when I look out the when I look at the window and it's raining, somebody some person, this is me being a philosopher, I guess, right? Some no good evildoer who is trying to confuse me in my faculties of thought had actually planted a giant umbrella above my house, and so shielded my roof from the rain so that my roof is actually not wet.
Yeah.
And when I make that inference at the time, I don't know whether or not that's true. I just infer that, most likely, what I can infer is most likely that my roof is wet. Is that belief?
I would say that is within the realm of what I'm talking about, because it is a system of belief where you don't have perfect information about what's on top of your roof. Right, as you said,
Right.
there could be some evil doer, some ne'er do well.
Umbrella Man strikes again.
Umbrella Man. Yeah, like you have a belief that your roof is wet because of the information, but you also don't know what the current state of your roof is. So in that Venn diagram that I drew, right, belief is a circle, and much of your belief composed of the evidence is that you see that let's not even say it's raining outside. You see water droplets form on your window because maybe somebody is just using their garden hose to like hose your window down, right? You don't even know where that water is coming from, but you see water coming down. That's the evidence. And then in the imperfect gap, right, you infer that there is no ne'er-do-well on top of your roof. You infer that there's not a garden hose that's just spraying your window in particular. You're also assuming you're not hallucinating, right? You're assuming a whole bunch of other things. That's the gap. That is the lack of evidence that you assume is true. And I would say that is a reasonable assumption, right? I bet your roof is wet, but I cannot guarantee that your roof is wet, right? That is what I'm defining as like the gap between evidence and belief.
That's it, because before I get to that, I one more like alteration of the example. Let's say then that it's I love playing with thought experiments like this. Let's say then it's like to use your point, right? I think it's raining, but it's actually the case that I am a professor and I need to go and give a lecture at a university, but for some reason maybe I have a condition that makes it so that going outside while it's raining is causes extreme discomfort and skin irritation. So if it's raining, I'm not going to give the lecture in person. I'm going to do it online. And it just so happens that one of my students who really does not want to be physically at the lecture decides with their garden hose to spray at my window right as I'm looking out. And then I go, oh, damn. All right. I guess class is canceled, or, maybe not canceled, moved on, like whatever, what have you. Right. But, you see where the train of thought's going. Then I go, okay, well, I guess class is canceled. I'm again making an inference that it's raining, but perhaps it might be an inference that is less accurate or less. And I don't want to. Well, scientific is what I was going to say. It's less founded if, for example, I also knew that I had a student who was really, really averse to physical lectures, who had in the previous 3 lectures was like, I hate this, I can't do this. I'm so stressed out every time the professor picks me for a question. I feel so freaked out. I don't want to do this. I'd rather have it online, and they've said those thoughts out loud and they've been known to you. You might, second guess the weather based on your observations of the window.
Yeah. And if you are that paranoid, that is because you as a person are paranoid about that being a potential, your prediction machine would have weighted that differently if you thought that it was a possibility that some ne'er-do-well student was trying to sabotage your lecture, right? But that's an individual difference, because if it were me, even if I had a disgruntled student, I would never bother to think that it could be that. That's our individual difference, which colors the spectrum of belief. It's one of those things that can fill in the gap that evidence does not supply. And we also choose to ignore evidence that is inconvenient too, right? That's human, to ignore evidence that is inconsistent with our belief, because, as we've repeatedly said, not knowing is anxiety provoking. And I think part of forcing yourself to do science or philosophy is being okay with that anxiety. If you always ignore the anxiety or always ignore things that provoke anxiety, I don't think you grow quite as much as a human.
Well, yeah, absolutely, well said. I was just gonna say, like, I think you've already gone ahead and did that, right? But I was gonna say, like, that process of inference is science, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's why, like, in the video, it's like so frustrating, because in the video I'm very careful to point this all out. The nature of truth, we can never say things are true or false. There are only models that can better predict experiments, and experiments that can better build models, and evidence that is more, I do this all so carefully. All of it is so careful. Yeah. And I still get comments that are like, abiogenesis could never happen. I'm like, that's not like, you can't like say that. Like, from a philosophical point of view, you can't say that. You can say that it's improbable. I actually think that's fine. If you say it's impossible, then I'm like, dude, that's not the point. I spent half an hour of my video like talking about epistemics to try to like open your mind to and people say, oh well, you have your own biases too, you'll never be like won over for certain things. And I say I think I do a pretty good job at actively challenging myself in those beliefs, right? I incorporated creationist arguments into the video because I found them to be interesting, and they did make me a little uncomfortable, and then I thought about them for a while, and then I was comfortable again because some of those arguments not as good as others, right? But I allowed myself to be uncomfortable and challenge instead of attacking their beliefs or who they are or anything like that. I say, okay, I'm going to take your beliefs that admittedly make me uncomfortable because I built my whole epistemic framework around the idea that there is no supernatural being and that life could have arisen abiotically. Like, I need to believe that because if there is a supernatural being and evil exists, I'm just not comfortable with that arrangement, right? Like, there's a part of me, like, I can't tell you that there is no God. I can't tell you that there's no supernatural being. But what I can say is I prefer to believe that we are a mass of undulating molecules and dumb apes and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. To me, the world makes a bit more sense that way. I don't have proof either way, but it is the belief system that I think is more consistent with what I want to believe in. And that is vulnerable to admit that, right? Because in the atheist wars, you know, it's like, you're wrong. It's like, no, like, this is unprovable. It's all of this is unfalsifiable, right? But like, if you want to believe that life can happen from abiotic origins, then you have to accept that the science is imperfect, but it can get more accurate as we go along, or more reflective of the evidence that we collect. Because I can't even say that it's true. I don't know that we weren't spawned in like Minecraft eggs, right? Like creeper egg, you know, like right-clicked into existence. I don't have evidence if that is true nor false, but it is more fun to believe that it could happen abiotically from chemical precursors, right? It's more interesting that way, in my opinion.
Do you think that it's something that we could ever... I know that, like, you know, you've definitely approached it in the video itself, but I kind of just want to ask again, like, here in the framing of this conversation, like, do you think that at some point we'll solve it?
Some of my exact words were, I don't think we can solve it because we don't have like a TARDIS to go back in time, right? We don't have a streamer at the beginning of existence to stream. Oh, that's you know how that woman gave birth on Twitch, like yeah, like we don't have a streamer.
There you go. That's the origin of life. Then
that's the origin of that baby's life, right? Like, that's fine. If we could do that, then we got it. We got him, bro.
Live stream somebody. That's so. Anyway, sorry. Let's go.
But yeah, like, there's no streamer at you know 4 billion years ago that live streamed. Oh, look, the first cell. Like, that's my guy, right? You can't have that. So the answer is no. We'll never solve it because it is unsolvable. But that's not a scientific attitude to have, to just give up there, because you can continue to make predictions that are more and more accurate, more and more representative of the geologic evidence, the chemical evidence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Pushing our understanding of how life could have originated is like an excellent stress test for our understanding of biology, speaking as a biologist, right? Like, if we really know what we're talking about, you know, we think we know the central dogma, you know, DNA to RNA to protein. Well, you know, it's a stress test to see if those models still work as we get simpler and simpler life, all the way back to our abiotic origins. And there's a chance that our modern understanding of biology doesn't really work with those rules, but somehow physicists get away with this no problem, right? People don't complain about like standard model physics. They just kind of go, yeah, I mean, it explains what we know. It's complicated, it's ugly, but it makes some pretty good predictions. It keeps on getting better. And people don't really, I mean, if you're a string theorist, you might think differently, but for the standard model, like, from what I understand, like, people are not like, think, oh, well, you know, I mean, I guess that's not true. Right? So people still believe, you know, there are people who believe that we were just snapped into existence, and that it's not worth thinking about what happened before the Big Bang, right? But I think the attitude is more accepted, that like thinking about what happened before the Big Bang is still an interesting and valid question because it challenges our modern understanding of physics in a kind of way, right? Where, you know, it's like, how hot is too hot? I don't know if you've heard of this physical limitation before. The like Planck sorry, absolute zero, right? Are you familiar with the absolute zero concept?
The coldest it gets, yeah. Yep.
It's just like we don't have physics that explains what happens when you actually I'm getting it confused. There's absolute zero. Somebody in the comments will correct me. Somebody but the idea is similar where there's like I think there's something called the Planck temperature where it's like the opposite of absolute zero. Because if absolute zero is zero movement, the like theoretical zero base kinetic energy where nothing moves, like you at least I don't think you can have negative kinetic energy. Like you can't be more still than not moving at absolute zero. But then there's like the Planck temperature, which is on the other end of the spectrum, which is how hot is the hottest it could ever be without like, you know, is there a hot limit? And like, from what I understand, there is no hot limit. It's just that past a certain temperature, the math that you use to explain the universe doesn't work anymore. So I'm like, why can't we have that for biology too? Why isn't it the similar situation where like our rules for biology work the way they work because that's, you know, that's reflective of what we know biology today to be. And then the rules back then, you know, maybe they're different. Maybe it was, you know, peptide nucleic acids, as I said in the video, right? Maybe there's some entirely different molecule that was the prebiotic precursor to RNA, to DNA, to protein. Like, I just feel like there's so much interesting creativity, including panspermia, even though I personally don't like that idea. But it's not afforded the same grace as like Planck temperature is, where people aren't like, oh, physics is wrong because we can't explain hotter than hot.
That's interesting because I've not really like I've actually observed because like I think I'm a little bit more just a bit more familiar with physics than biology because I failed biology super early on in my schooling, so I just didn't bother doing it. So I did physics a bit more, but like it did get to a point where like contrasting theories existed that were not like provable in the sense that like they were really good for explaining how stuff happened, but were not necessarily like they couldn't but they still couldn't explain everything. For example, like Newtonian like mechanics. And this is me, a philosopher, talk about physics. So somebody ask a real physicist instead if I get anything wrong. But like it's the idea that like, you know, Newton's theories of gravity and the way stuff moves and attracts each other is frankly speaking in the scientific world like an outdated model insofar as it does not hold as much explanatory power as like general relativity, right? Like I think is the idea. And there are things that general relativity can't explain that people have tried to come up with more theories to like more encompassing theories to explain, but nonetheless have not been able to fully explain, or at least it doesn't withstand the criticisms and also like the experiments that like the theory of relativity was able to do, or at least general relativity. And because of that, it's like this is kind of like what I understand, the predominant model of understanding the world. But one, it's not the thing we teach high school kids. And two, even amongst the most advanced people, it's like it's sort of disagreed. Like general relativity is still disagreed upon because some people go like, it doesn't explain this, it doesn't have enough explanatory power. And so like there's where I see the cracks of like oh, actually, you know, physics rules are hard and in place and we all agree with them, because I find it also to happen there. And because I'm just not familiar with biology, I didn't know that it happens in biology as well. I just thought, you know, people generally, everyone who is a biologist agrees upon most of the basic like knowledge. Most of the basic theory.
I want to make this very clear. Biologists do agree by and large how life happens as we know it today. I'm talking about the comments, like the popular perception of abiogenesis and life, where it's like that's why like physics, it's more well, it's not like Newton was wrong, it's just he was right for a certain case, right? And that's big objects doing big object things. And in terms of abiogenesis, it's like people are very attached to certain epistemic frameworks that show that abiogenesis is statistically improbable. And I just want to be like, but like, yeah, we like learn though, right? Like we like get better at geology over time, right? We thought, you know, Miller and Urey back in the 50s, they were the first real serious abiogenicist experimenters. They had found, and every biologist learns this experiment, that if you take a bunch of gases that they hypothesized from the early Earth, you shoot electricity through them and you get amino acids, which is amazing. Every biologist knows this. But Miller and Urey assumed that Earth's atmosphere was like Jupiter's, which is wrong. Earth's atmosphere was different than Jupiter's. Were Miller and Urey wrong in that way? I mean, kind of, right? But like we learned that the Earth is different than Jupiter. Whoa, crazy, right? And I think we will continue to learn ways in which the Earth is different than Jupiter, and that will make models better and more accurate over time. And so I'm like, in terms of like ways in which physics can break, it's like, yeah, I mean, like for the public, I think my perception is that the popular perception of physics is that it is pretty good. Like Newton, pretty good. F equals ma, you push a thing, it pushes back on you. I think we're chill, we're chill with that, right? And then when it's not so chill, we say, okay, well then there's relativity, and we go, okay, we have to like learn more math to explain small things and things that go very fast. And, that just wasn't a thing in Newton's time, right? So this the idea of like, well, we can't know, so we just give up. It's like, but like, Newton was like the 1700s, and then like Albert Einstein, who was alive like not that long ago. He was alive. Mm-hmm. I visited his house on a tour. Cool. It was a modern looking like he was like alive not that long ago. Okay, and then we like invented new physics. So give us some time. Give us some time.
Do you think it's like time for the biologists to like gain the faith of the average like lay people? Like or is it more like time to really get at the not infallible, but the one big theory that kind of gets everyone in nodding their heads?
I think that biology is pretty set. It's abiogenesis that is like so divisive. Like if it happened at all, like if you do believe in abiotic origins, then it's vents versus pawns, and I'm happy to have that fight, right? Get in with the ring, we'll spar. Pawns have cycles, vents don't have cycles. Vents have metabolism, pawns don't. Now we're arguing in the field of evidence, right? And I love that. That's great. The argument of did it happen abiotically or not is like not. It's like not, to me, it's not like a biology question or a science question even. That's just, like that escapes the boundary of the good faith argumentation that I see in the comments. Because I mentioned in the stream before that like there were a lot of good faith arguments from creationists in the comments section that are not in conflict with anything that I said. And they've thanked me for having that kind of open attitude towards them. Yeah, if you want to believe that supernatural origin created chemistry in a way where you could give rise to life, that's totally fine. But in terms of bringing it back to belief, like where we disagree on our belief, like we took a look at all the evidence, and for these creationists that say, okay, well, God did that, I say, okay, I'm cool. That's cool. That's chill, man. Because we took a look at the same evidence. We agreed that it was evidence, but we have different interpretations of it given our different backgrounds. And I think that's kind of the spectrum of belief. And I think Folder had mentioned earlier in chat about whether or not you serve beliefs or whether or not belief serves you. And of course, I think it's like a two-way kind of thing, right? You are constantly updating your model of your reality, I think, to minimize anxiety. And I didn't mention that in the video, but your comment made me think of that. Like, how much of your belief do you think is governed by how much anxiety it creates in your day-to-day existence?
Sorry, I don't think I have anything to add to that. I just think
like, do you think your epistemic framework is governed primarily by anxiety? Because as speaking from my experience, that is something that I believe.
This is the question to me. Sorry, I thought this was like I thought like the question was like a statement to like as a response to that. Do I think
or how much of
how much of
maybe I'll word this a bit more interestingly for you, but how much of philosophy do you believe is motivated by anxiety?
Right. Okay. Sorry, because I thought you were like using that question as like a response to the thing you were like arguing earlier about like the people who. Anyways, so if it's like as a question for me, right? Like, I think all of it is, but in the sense that like I see not anxiety just in the sense of like my personal anxiety, although it is very personal and it is a very subjective experience. It's the and this is me being a Kierkegaardian. It's this is the foundational thing of like existence, right? This is the thing that puts us on the edge of that cliff and like allows us that freedom to act, to to make a choice that matters, and that's what's paralyzing. That's what causes the anxiety, because you don't feel anxiety if you feel like there's truly nothing you can do or truly no choice to be made. Like if there were no freedom, if you were just you know um doomed, if you knew, for example, that in 10 days the sun explodes and it's all over, then it's like your anxiety isn't, oh, what do I do about the sun, because the sun's exploding and we can't deal with that. Your anxiety is in like, how do I spend the last 10 days? I don't know what I could spend the last 10 days doing. That's where the freedom is. The freedom is in like in your choice, in your ability to make decisions, in spite of impending death and all of that. And that's the anxiety that I think is so like profoundly meaningful, and like is the center of like my philosophical pursuits. Is that is the anxiety both as like an emotional, like psychological state of mind maybe, and but also just like a condition of the human experience in the broader sense, or maybe in this existential sense of the word anxiety, where we have the freedom to choose.
And that is why I think philosophy is for sad boys. Right? If philosophy,
because if you truly had no hope, if there was nothing to do, then you wouldn't be sad and anxious. You would be relieved, wouldn't you? If you really had no choice, you'd be like, okay, well, that's it then.
I actually would
But then it's
challenge
because
that.
you have choice.
I think it's interesting the way that I would challenge that, because I think this is interesting. You're not necessarily wrong. I think it is. We can display this right now, right? We have a difference in belief, because I am a biologist and I've worked with animals, and I don't view us as fundamentally different than animals, other than we got good with tools, like fundamentally on a biological level, right? A mouse that is trained to have a fear response will have that fear response no matter what, right? Like, so there's this induced anxiety protocol where you allow a mouse to free wander and they'll step on a trigger that shocks them. And if you do that enough time, the mouse will learn that it has no agency, that it's going to get shocked. And even though they know it's going to happen, quote unquote, no, because we can't be inside the mouse's head, right? But they were conditioned to provoke a kind of anxiety response in anticipation of the punishment. I don't think we're that different, except where I agree with you is that we have the choice. We can choose to accept, right? There's like no mouse on planet Earth that chooses to accept the foot shock. And I think that is uniquely human, if we want to talk about the unique ability of humans to adapt. Who was that philosopher? The one, oh gosh, it was someone who had like a terrible life, but then said something to the effect, as many philosophers do, but said that like the thing that you have control over is your attitude to your garbage situation. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, it is generally the philosophy of the Stoics.
Okay, yeah. So I think in terms of like philosophy being very human, I think that we have the mouse. We're not that different from mice. We get anxious. Who doesn't? We were historically both predator and prey. So there's a lot of wound up energy that we have and a lot of fear that we have just existing as humans. But the choice to be okay with that is a uniquely humanizing one, because again, like animals don't, as far as I know, having worked with mice, just speaking about mice, they don't have this kind of resignation. You know what I mean?
But it's interesting because I don't know anything about my it's interesting because I don't know anything about animals, and I'm sitting here going like, no, but I don't know if a bat would do that or if it would react that way. I don't know anything about the animals at all. I just like I think the hunch, right? The intuition is more so like I think at least humans are capable of philosophizing to that degree and experiencing that anxiety, and that the explanatory powers for why we feel that, I think, are not sufficient if we rely just on like the I guess the evo psych explanations, like the whole like we evolved pain as a response to trauma so that our body knows to move away, because then it's like I on some level the way I conceive of that is like, okay, so why do I feel pain? Because if the explanation is it's because evolutionarily that was advantageous, and so like I if I get hit by something, or if something's really hot, I know to move my hand away and I go ow, like, and I can do that because my body's telling me that, like, that can all happen without me experiencing like the pain itself. Like my body could just know to do that, and I could just in my head almost register as like a, oh, pain, I need to move my hand away. Like it shouldn't, like, why does it accompany the phenomenal experience of it as well, is I guess where I don't know where this is going. I'm sorry. I'm like
no, man, it's interesting, and I do want to make sure, like, I'm fully aware that us two yapping is like committing one of the gravest sins that I think a science communicator can do, which is to talk out of their own field. I want to tell everybody, I don't have, I'm just some guy, okay? Like we have to do the whole thing where I'm just some guy, okay? Like interpret okay. I think we have this in common, right, Charis? Like, even when I'm talking about philosophy, I don't want my philosophical beliefs to be mama birded into your mouth, because that would make me feel really weird, right? So when I'm speaking, please disagree. Like, don't, even if you like me as a content creator, don't ever treat me like people treat Voldemort podcasters, okay? I don't want
hang on every word, right?
Yeah. Even if you identify with me, even if you like my vibe, don't stop thinking for yourself just because I said certain things. And there's plenty of disagreement in chat with me, which I love because I am reading chat, but I'm engrossed in my conversation, so I can't.
You guys in chat are making very good like observations, like your further thoughts are really cool. Like I obviously haven't really responded to chat much at all. Like I've responded to chat occasionally, but like I just want to say the discussion is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And to that end, I want to the mama birding, right? Something interesting I want to point out is like I've sort of, this is almost like a theory I'm testing. Is like, no matter how much you emphasize, please don't take my word as gospel. Please think for yourself. People will take your word as gospel, and they will not think for themselves because it's the easier thing to do.
No
matter how many times you repeat it.
I know.
And like my answer to this is to be ironic. Is actually like Socratic irony in a way. Not just like saying something ironically, but like almost living an ironic existence, which is very Kierkegaardian again. But where instead of saying like, don't take all what I say as fact, you should think for yourself, I find that it's so much more, it's so much more like mentally prodding to say to someone, you should actually trust everything that I say. I know everything. You should do whatever I tell you, because I am like, even though I only have like a degree in philosophy, like I actually know everything about all the sciences and all the fields, and I can tell you exactly how you should live your life. And then when I find that when I say this is, or if I say this, it gets people to go, no, you don't. And then actually think for themselves. Like I found that to be somewhat effective.
I think that's very cool. I couldn't do it because I don't want to be seen as an academic renegade. Because there are certain science communicators out there who position themselves as challengers to authority and don't take like challenges to their own authority very well. I don't want to be that way. I'm a legitimate cheerleader. It's definitely
easier as a philosopher.
Yeah, because you do have a tradition.
I imagine
you have a tradition of like, well, fucking nothing I say matters. But if it does matter, it matters a lot, right? Like you can play both sides. Whereas for science, it's like, well, you should probably take, you should take medicine. Like that is a thing with like very.
Please take your medicine.
Please take the medicine, dude. Like, you're dying. Like, please take the medicine. Come on. So yeah, I'm not comfortable with positioning myself ironically in that kind of way, because it is kind of, people already do that, and I don't really like that. Even if it's ironic,
it's hard to tell.
I'm sure you're like familiar with arguments like, does it matter if it's ironic or not? What is the, I'm not going to tread over those arguments as well. But I do appreciate that, like, I think the ethos that we have is that, like, live in the anxiety, do it. don't look, it's anxiety. Look the anxiety right in the eye and do not run. Like, do not run and
Yeah.
and sit here. We're gonna sit and we're gonna be uncomfortable for a little bit. And I think you had like your male loneliness stream, or it was either that or the one before
It
it.
was the
where-
misogyny stream, I think.
yeah, you had a misogyny stream where you were just yelling at the audience, which is so funny. Do you want to recreate? Because I also feel similarly. If you want to recreate that crash out.
Oh god, I recreated the crowd. No, it was just like because when I made the misogyny stream, or when, like I knew what would happen. Like I clicked go live, and like before I even did that, I realized, oh, this is like the most amount of likes that's been on a stream before I've actually started it. So it's like clear to me, and I knew going into it as well, and I knew my demographic. You know, I know as a VTuber with an anime avatar of a somewhat like handsome anime character that like what people want to hear is they want to click onto the stream and they want to hear Charis and go, yeah, misogyny's bad and we love women. And it's like, that's true. I believe those things. But if you clicked onto it just so you could hear those empty words from me, it's the same as if you go around in like different streamers' streams and then go like, hey, can you say X thing? And it's like the most recent political fad. It's like, I can say it. Of course I could say those words out of my mouth. But then is it doing anything to you beyond you going like, yes, I can now add one more member to the team with the correct opinion, which is my opinion. I only have the correct opinions, and like just keep doing that over and over again rather than challenging yourself to just build up this like repertoire of people that agree with you on this issue and you have the right opinion of it. Like you're not challenging yourself at all. That's one thing. But but then people don't even see the merits of challenging themselves because they believe that like Charis, Euphranor, yes, please tell me why misogyny is bad. No, I shouldn't tell you why misogyny is bad. We know misogyny is bad. You should hear my experiences with it. But what you shouldn't do is just go like, okay, yeah, that's why it's bad. It's because this one VTuber online said this. No, think about your own life. Like be in your own positions. Examine the things that have happened to you that have been extremely gross and horrible and like, undermined your rights and and your personhood. And don't just think about how it made you feel sad, because that is very true. Your sadness, your pain, your frustration is very much characterized as misogyny. But like if you just keep thinking of it as like, okay, men bad, or like people who hate women bad, or misogynists are cringe and bad, which is what I say too as like the opener, then you don't actually get down to the root of like, okay, how do I deal with this? Not just as like a societal global issue, but like, why am I dealing with it? What's the point of dealing with it? If you can just hide away from all of that, wouldn't it be better? And that's what's happened, is we've created these echo chambers and people are hiding into these echo chambers and going like, I'm only going to hear opinions that validate my thoughts and everything, all of my preconceived notions. And the only time you click into a Charis Euphranor stream is when he's going like, women are great and men are trash. And then it's like, you're not listening to the rest of what I'm saying. The rest of what I'm saying is what matters. We know misogyny is bad. Who cares that misogyny is bad? What matters is that you think. What matters is that you choose. What matters is that you like live your life. And what matters is that you think about the things that impact your life and then move beyond them and then become this like better person, not just someone who wants to seek others' validations for yourselves. No, the validation has to come from within. It all has to be from yourself inside. It has to come out. You have to face the world. No one else can face the world for you. That was
legendary crash out. Round of applause, man. Legendary crash out. But I agree.
I'm sweating
because with this abiogenesis video, right? Like I had a moment when I was writing the script where I was crashing out like you, because I was like, oh my god, the algorithm, because we're burdened with the freaking algorithm. The algorithm wants me to do an elbow drop from the sky dunking on creationists, right? That's what gets popular. But I don't want to do that. That's boring. It's not interesting to have like, atheist takes down blah blah blah, and this professor can't, and then everybody clapped. It's like no. And I get my streaming audience knows this, right? Because you're probably here for a bit more in-depth conversation. But that's why like it's like a deeply held, because there are some people who pay lip service to the idea of like, don't trust me, I'm like a dummy, but then they don't really believe that. They don't like hold. I don't think that they hold that as a deeply held belief, and more like it's just like legal cover. Don't trust me. I'm a dummy. But like, I think where we relate is this like antagonism to this idea of making learning and growth easy. Like it's like in your misogyny stream, it's like, well, it's easier to lift a dumbbell than it is to self-actualize, right? So I don't want to get too much into that topic, but like the idea being that like there's so much reward in doubting yourself, not to the point where you're paralyzed and can't do anything about it, right? But it is rewarding to, just a little bit every day. When you're yelling at the viewer, I feel yelled at too, but like in a good way, right? Because it reminds me that my reality is shaped by algorithms, not just my YouTube algorithm, but the video that I made on abiogenesis. When I type in abiogenesis into Google Scholar, I'm not getting the most true papers. I'm getting the papers that have the most hits on them. What does that mean? If you just search abiogenesis in a clean browser in Google Scholar, like 3 of the papers are from creationists, right? Who are making the argument that it cannot happen. Why is it there? Because people are citing each other, and there's this circle of self-congratulatory citation that is pushing these like, it cannot happen. Not that it's unlikely, because it is unlikely. That's a very fine point to make. Challenging the statistical probability of abiogenesis, like I mentioned in my previous stream, I don't have a problem with that angle. But then saying it cannot happen is like, well, why not? That terminates the thought. There's no more thought after it can't. The conversation's over then, and that's sad. So when you're yelling about like, why did you click on this thumbnail? Because you want me to say that women are good and misogyny is cringe. And like when making that video, I was like, well, I'm not gonna do that. I'm aware that I'm being manipulated by thumbnails as well, because that's what the algorithm is built for, right? We have to contend with this omniscient pseudo god in the algorithm that warps reality around us as we know it. But I think like yelling at the audience and being like, did you click on this because you want me to say women are good? That's like important. And that's not algorithm wise, right? Like it is counter to making popular content. But that's why I think it is interesting and should be engaged with. I think it's really cool.
Because it's like, people want to click on the stream with the anime avatar person going like, yes, your worries are soothed and it's okay, we're in this together, which is true, which are things I do say, but then I also say some stuff that's uncomfortable, and I'm not going to bring that up in this stream because it's
not on mine. On yours is fine.
Yeah. But like, I will say some things that are uncomfortable because it's like, these are the ideas that are worth engaging in order for us to fully, dive into that, right? But that's counter to, as you said, like algorithm slop, or like, just anything that does well, because there's an expectation that people have when they click onto it, and they want that expectation to be like met almost like without risk, right? We click on stuff with more views, and I do this, and I don't say we as in like, oh, all of you who are inferior to my superior mind. No, I'm like also very goopy, like what's the word, like what's the phrase, like Nakey Jakey says, like goopy gamer goblin brain where like I will also click on the video. If I have 2 videos on my dash and I want to watch, like pick one of them, I'll pick on the one probably with more views, probably, because like that tells me that people have clicked on it and liked it, and I think to myself, like subconsciously I think, oh, I don't want to risk clicking on a video that ends up being like boring or bad. Like I want something that is the same, basically, without being the same. It's the same but different, but it's basically the same. It should meet all my expectations and there should be no risk involved. Like that's how I base some of my decision making as well. And that's just me as like a consumer, right? As like someone who watches content on YouTube, even if it's educational. I don't click on the topics that, or like I only click on the big thumbnails with the huge production value by the established channels, like most of the time at least, because I have that like anxiety that like, my time is wasted, or like so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Or it would make me uncomfortable. Yeah.
I want to take that too, where like I think the point is as long as you're aware you're being manipulated by algorithms, because I agree, right? Like I am a victim of this too, where like your reality is handcrafted to you by tech bros to get you to keep watching. And there's going to be, it's like you have to acknowledge that like when you do research, from an epistemological point of view, that's why abiogenesis was so important to me. It was like, oh, my algorithms are shaping the evidence that I am exposed to. And as long as you are aware and have the humility to know that knowledge is fallible and that you didn't, like, I didn't do a comprehensive job on abiogenesis. There's no way, right? Because even if you know, homegrown organic research, you load up Google Scholar and you just type in abiogenesis, that's already curated for you. To do a sort of completely 100% organic version of this video is literally impossible. Like you cannot do it. And like there are many layers that get in between belief and the evidence that I'm not saying click on low view videos. What I am saying is be aware that you are being nudged towards videos that have higher production, that have higher social proof. I don't know if you've heard of this concept, but like if you see a video, as you said, with higher views, that affords them a level of social proof. They have been approved by the algorithm, and therefore it is one fewer hurdle, which is also why, like, to y'all who have been with me since I was a nobody, like, shout out to you. Thank you. Like, I'm very happy with my progression on YouTube, but it relies on people giving my channel a chance, right? And I think I'm not saying click on every video on your feed and, you know, middle finger to the algorithm, because the algorithm is great at its job, which is to find you content that you want to watch. It's really good at doing that. It just might not be making you happy or growing, because sometimes growing is painful and you don't want to have to grow every day, which is reasonable. You don't want to have to improve every day, which is reasonable, because improvement is hard. So I think that, like, ironically, if you did begin like a formal video with a crash out like that, I think it would do I really think it would do pretty well. If you baited
in
people
the beginning of the video,
in the beginning of the video, where you just start yelling at them. Like, if you were to clip that crash out, I think that does well. Because there's also meeting this need of, like, I think, you know, it's far easier to ignore this anxiety and a lot harder to actualize through the anxiety, right? And I think there's the market, like, I think there's a gap in the market on how to navigate existential anxiety, you know, beyond take a supplement and lift some dumbbells, right? But like, actually from a philosophy, because in therapy it's different, right? That's also a valid route, but I think you need both, because not everybody goes to therapy. And if there are people who can be convinced that anxiety is worth being in temporarily, I think that is healthier for society, in my opinion.
Like I'm in complete agreement, and that's why I can't really. It is going to be healthier, but it's not going to, or at least my more cynical, pessimistic side is thinking, yeah, but it's not marketable. Like, it's not, this isn't where the money is, and that's why it won't happen.
That's why I believe things like I've thought about this a lot for my own channel, right? Like, that's why I think, like, supporters are so valuable. Patreon, YouTube membership, because it shows that there is, like, the algorithm is not a monolith, right? It is catering towards people who want to be served up some content, and not necessarily for people who want to seek content. Because sometimes when you have your algorithm slop, and again, I'm not demeaning anybody, I love my algorithm slop.
I love algorithm slop.
I love it. Just like,
yes.
Yeah, feed that slop to me. Like, I get it. It's delicious. But like, I think of it this way. I do a lot of food analogies, but like, say you go to an all-inclusive resort for like a week of your life, and you just eat all the delicious slop, yum 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 yum, all the steak and foie gras, whatever hedonistic pleasures. After a week, you're like, maybe I should like eat broccoli. Like, there's like a need, there's like an internal compass where you're like, maybe I should have a little bit of fiber. And I think there is a market for being fiber. You know, I think that's cool. And I want to be, you know, I would love to make a career out of being fiber and broccoli. I have a members video that's just this, right? So even though, like, I'm fully aware that the algorithm wants me to do some dunking, I think it is trust in my members and trust that there are more people who are like members who will support the channel. And if you're not a member, don't worry, I'm still talking about you. Like, anybody who's watching the stream right now, I'm grateful that you care enough about my content to hang out with me on a Monday afternoon, where I am time zone wise. Like, that is proof that people like that exist. The anxiety and the unknown is questioning how many people are out there, but they exist. And as creators, I think there is a bit of that same scientific anxiety of like, well, I don't know if my content will be good or not. Like, yeah, you don't know. Just make it. Make it. And yeah, maybe people will like it, you know? That's fine.
It will probably, frankly, it will probably be bad. Like if it's your first time around, if you've never done it before, your first few things are going to be bad, and that's normal. Like it should be bad because it has to be bad first before it can be good.
Yeah, I talked at
That's
length,
what I think, at least.
at length about my failed projects. Like I have been in some form a science communicator for the last, oh my god, how old am I? Like half my life, pretty much. Because I started trying to do SciComm in high school. Yeah, I was like dog water at it. You know, I had this is so cringe. There's a webcomic that we were making as a collaboration where I had personified every scientific discipline as its own like power. You know, like Avatar, fire, earth, air, wind, fire, earth, air, water. It was like chemistry, biology, physics, math. Like they all had like powers.
Math is the last.
Yeah, like the final boss power. Like I think I made math some ridiculous like reality altering. Like if you could change the constants of the universe, like some crazy stuff like that. Like that's cringe. That's a terrible idea. That's a direct one-to-one knockoff of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and it sucks. Like I think it's a fun idea. I think if you were to actually, okay, that's free. If anybody here wants to make that, you don't have to pay me any royalties. You can make that. I don't have any attachment to the idea anymore, besides the fact that like the majority of things that I have made, I have hated with a fiery passion. And Phi the Neutrophil is the only project that I have been a part of in my SciComm career that I have actively liked. It has taken me 15 years to make one thing that I'm like, I think people would watch this. So it's normal to have your thing suck. I'm saying this is a different soapbox entirely, but like it just gets,
I think we've just drifted through like two different topics at this point.
Yeah
to get to where we are right now. But no, yeah, I think it is very much like your first few things will suck, and you also don't see the projects that don't work for like, you know, that are out there. The algorithm has made it so that you only see the successes, right? Because those are the only things worth seeing. Is people's successes, is like the really good content, is the stuff that's like, you know, that has struck that balance perfectly. And like you shouldn't be paralyzed by that, because you are being served the stuff that works. The stuff that doesn't work is not being served to you because nobody wants to see stuff that doesn't work. And even though it's necessary. But
like the algorithm is also looking for new blood too, because there's always some weird niche subculture that, you know, the people who first watched my channel, the people who gifted me my first few views, who remembered me all the way back 1 or 2 years ago, because the badge is now 2 years old. Like, y'all are a little weird, right? But I like that. The fact that anybody can do well, potentially, is proof that the human experience is so varied. And I guess if we were to force connection to the whole beliefs thing, is that everybody's special, everybody's individual. And because the algorithm is hunting for, they're trying to find an audience for your video, right? And, you know, I think it's pretty good at that, but it has a finite capacity to try. And so, you know, new YouTubers will complain, oh, the algorithm disfavors me. It's like, well, the algorithm tried. And in your test audience, the algorithm had determined that there aren't that many people interested, or it's hard to find an audience for the thing that you made. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be making things. It just means you need to give the algorithm more data to find the weirdos that are going to want your video. You know, I say weirdos, assuming you are making very personalized content. Because if you want to do AI slop, yeah, the algorithm, that's a different conversation, right? Because if you want to make popular content, that's a different thing. I'm not telling you how to make popular content. I'm telling you how to make content that you love, because I've spent 15-ish years trying to make content that I love. And it's not easy, but it can be done, and do it. you can do it.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess I would say this. I want to say the opposite. Because I have this tendency to want to like say things ironically and go like, actually, you should never try. If anything feels even 1% scary, you should stop. That's actually your bodily functions doing as they should have, and they're warning you of danger, and so therefore you shouldn't do anything. But even if I said that ironically, people actually like, because of how, you know, because of the state of things, and how discouraging it is to try new things. Like I remember back when I was doing my degree as well, like I was so discouraged from doing anything that wasn't philosophy that even though I was technically allowed like free electives and I would go ahead and pick those free electives, I couldn't pick any of the ones that I was bad at because it would tank my GPA. Like I did like half a year, or I did like I did one semester of psychology. It was like a psych 101 thing, and I got like a D plus. And it was like I didn't dislike it in the sense that like I felt like I was learning a lot and there was a lot for me and I thought it was interesting, but I was so bad at it, it totally ruined my GPA and I had to like spend the next few years like fixing it.
Hey, you tried. I actually didn't take philosophy for that same reason. I was like, I don't want to deal with 20-page readings because I'm a bad reader. I didn't even bother trying. I didn't even let philosophy ruin my GPA because I was just like, I'm not even going to try. And I regret it. I regret it. I wish I had taken philosophy because I really do enjoy it.
Yeah, and it obviously depends on your institute and whatever, but like it is very much like taking risks is so discouraged. I feel as though like nowadays, and I don't have a good explanatory power for why that's the case. It just to me seems almost like the hunch that like culturally we at least through some, you know, through some conception of it online have an aversion to risk, an aversion to like something that's actually truly like new.
Oh, because we don't want to be cringe, right?
Yes,
it's the fear of being cringe.
I don't like the apathy. I don't like the apathy. I don't like the fear of being, because you're going to be cringe, and that's like a little bit cringe, and that's fine. Like people are cringe. To me, most people are a little cringe, and that's coming from me, someone who's very cringe. And has done very cringe things. It's fine. It's okay.
Yeah, you want to know what cringe thing Charis said right before stream started?
Oh.
I had gotten back from the bathroom and I was like, all right, are we ready to stream? And he went, cool beans, or what the fuck? What did you say? Like,
I said coolios.
Coolios?
It's no, because I realized like I said it, or I used to say it because it was, I started saying it at the time when it stopped being cool. And it was funny to me because it was so uncool. But then that was itself like a while ago too. So like all of a sudden for me to say it again, I just completely forgot. It's like I time traveled and I forgot what era I'm in anymore.
It's so true. I just said to him millennial. The thing is that even though it's cringe, it's so funny. We were like laughing so hard because it was so funny. Because you have to take these risks if you want to produce those like large emotional reactions. Like I set out to make that abiogenesis video as I wanted it to be like art. Right, I want to pour my actual soul into it, and I think if you watch the ending, I do evoke a lot of artistic imagery that Mylan drew for me, because I wanted to share with you a piece of my soul, right? And you know, there are people out there who think that's cringe, that I should be. Oh my god, wait. You know what the funny? I think about this comment all the time. You want to know what the funniest comment I've ever received on my channel is?
What was it?
There's a guy who wrote a comment under my video who said, "Stop trying to be cute." Stop trying to be cute. I'm like, oh my god. Go read a book, dude. Go. You can. There's nothing stopping you from opening up the Wikipedia page for this topic and just reading
not allowed anymore.
We're not allowed to have fun anymore, my guy. Like, oh my god. If you let every guy like do that to you, then you're not gonna do anything fun, and that sucks. Because when you open yourself up on the internet like that, you're gonna get people who I commented something like this on Twitter, where like you get an experience of the interesting variety and spectrum of humanity when you put content online. You're like, wow, you're a person too. That's crazy. We're the same species. Like the guy that's like, who shows up to a video with a blue fur ball in the thumbnail, watches the video and complains that I'm trying to be cute. That's crazy, bro. That's crazy. Like,
we need passion. We need people to like care about the things we're talking about, not just, you know, to not just find and distill the most effective ways to like spoon feed people information, because like the passion of it is what makes the like I don't want to do the feed a person to fish or then teach them how to fish, right? It's not quite, it's a little bit beyond that. It's not just about acquiring more fish, but it's also like just like reflecting upon why you sought the question in the first place, so that you can truly enjoy asking the question and answering it, not just do it because you feel this like compulsion to, so you can move on to the next project. Like just to sit with that for a bit and to be a little silly as well. Like it's so, I liked that's why I liked your video so much. Like I watched it recently, and it is my, like, I don't know if it's recency bias, and I don't know if it's just because like this stream comes right after that, right? Right after that video. But I do think your abiogenesis video is like my favorite video from you, because like, well, one, because you spend a good like 20 minutes talking about philosophy, even though you say I don't like philosophy, and then you spend the next 20 minutes talking about like formulating the most beautiful like explanation of epistemology within the scientific framework that I've ever heard from a YouTube video. And then like in the end, you tie it all together, not just as like, oh, and in conclusion, here's the answer to the question you click the video on. And it's like, no, it's like you then proceed to share, okay, like, but the point of it, what is this exercise, this exploration of the soul and like of this biology candy that I love the art of that as well. Like everything about that is like, I think so necessary, not just like necessary and like, oh, the content needs it, but like necessary for like the soul, for the metaphorical soul, for the enjoyment of the inquiry and the curiosity that like one needs to have.
But I think it's also, thank you for the compliments. But I think like in the era of like AI slop, where people are worrying, like there's like dooming about like art is dead because if AI slop is killing it, I think, being the optimist that I am, that if there are people out there who are genuinely putting their souls into their art, we're not going to have that problem, because I think people will seek out connection to other people. Yeah, there are going to be people who are going to be drowned out by AI slop, and there are people right now who are like, AI slop, just give it to me, right? Like, but I think there are enough people out there who have a intrinsic desire to connect with humanity, where if you make your art human, there will be people who enjoy your art because the art is a reflection of you as a human. And I think Mylan recently did a stream about parasocialism and streaming and VTubing and all that, which I think is an excellent stream. Ooh, so if you haven't seen that, that's really interesting. They had a parasociality researcher on, which I think is really interesting. I don't think that's...
I need to watch this.
It's good. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. There's like a type of parasocialism that I think is healthy in a certain way. It's obviously not as healthy as having a real relationship, but if you had to, in our increasingly suffocating capitalist technology kings society that we live in, connecting with other humans based off the art that they make is always going to be very invigorating. And the thing about being cringe is that humans are cringe. Everybody's cringe in their own flavor. Everybody thinks someone else is cringe. Like this rando who, again, clicked on my thumbnail and then told me not to be cute is a person that exists and is just
this is a real person.
This is a real person that exists, and that person's opinion should not matter to you, because that's insane. It's an insane thing. I love that comment so much. I think I have a screenshot somewhere. It's an insane thing to click on a cartoon and be like, I'm mad that the cartoon is cute. Like, what the heck? It's so funny. But I think like I really have been drawn more and more to content that is more personal and human, and I think like getting yelled at at the beginning of stream, be like, you clicked on it because you want me to say that I love women. It's like, you
just want me to affirm all of your pre-existing beliefs and all your preconceptions, and then that's it. No, I'm here to challenge you. I'm here to make you think.
That's so like I can tell that is a legitimate crash out, right? That's a part of your humanity that you displayed, your butt cheeks flapping in the wind, like vulnerable. Like this is how, you can think that that's cringe. Some people might think that you opening like that is cringe and handholdy and talking down to, or maybe too obvious, or virtue signaling even, right? You could imagine all sorts of angles that would discourage you from doing such a thing, but like, screw him. I don't know, screw him. This got a way far away from, like, it's only tangentially related to the video, but like the feedback I think is interesting, and I did promise to talk a little bit about that feedback.
Are you gonna what do you mean by the feedback?
Oh, like people not agreeing with this is not just this video, but in general, like people, it's not all, majority of comments are really lovely, and love that. And I was saying earlier in stream that the abiogenesis video was surprisingly civil for what I would typically get, which is horrible. Well, not.
I was gonna say I liked
very
the
good
comments
videos.
on it. It didn't feel very like
Yeah, it was very
anti-nerd.
respectful.
Like it didn't feel like people hated it. Yeah, so at least from the ones I've seen.
Yeah, some people were definitely baiting in the comment section, which really annoyed me. But I mean, that's gonna happen, right? So this has somehow turned into a "you should make art" soapbox again. But I will never stop saying that. Go. I think we were also talking about this behind the camera, you know, right before we went on. So we had like 15 minutes to talk, and we talked about a lot before we went live. But like, there are like people on Twitter who are like, I want to make content. And I'm like, okay, do it. Make content. I don't know, do it. You don't have to wait.
But it's scary.
You don't have to wait. I know you're taking up that position, right?
Yeah.
But like, you don't have to have my permission. Just go do it. I don't know. Like, for the 15 years of, did you have like a cringe art period in your past too, or?
My life so far has been still.
So you just live. You just
this
live
is like
the cringe
the
art.
latest edition. I don't think it gets any more cringe than presenting yourself as an anime character online. Honestly, I'm gonna be. Yes, this is it, and you're gonna go, oh my god, you're attacking all the other. Yes, I'm attacking all of VTubers, including myself. This is a little cringe, but I'm attacking in the sense that like cringe is a word we avoid because we don't want to be cringe, and I want to challenge that because it's like why is it cringe? Is it cringe because you have something to lose? It's cringe. Is it cringe because you're being vulnerable and you truly believe this thing, even though the cynicism of the world is telling you, okay, yeah, like, you know, this isn't cool. This isn't the right way to do content, like, or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then you have to like play by the rules of an algorithm or of anything else. No, it's like, I've had a long list of cringe things that I think would seem cringe initially if somebody were to read what I wanted to do on like a sheet of paper. But because I think for some reason, and this, you know, for whatever reason it is, I'm super, super thankful. Like I was always surrounded by really positive and supportive people. So even if it was cringe, like initially, like people go like, Charis, that sounds like a horrible cringe idea. I would explain it. And then like, I think maybe my passion would just bleed through and they would go, you know what? I see it. Actually, this is awesome. Like, this is great. I understand this now. Maybe, you know, and then they would maybe help me package it or like help me rethink how it's presented in a way that makes it a bit more, like, I guess digestible is the word to use, right? A bit less cringe in certain senses of the word, but are very much like people, like I've been surrounded by people who shared my passion, not like shared it for the same things, but shared it in like they felt my passion. They were passionate about my passion too, which I think I'm like is so important.
I think I mentioned this in our very first collab on your channel, actually, where I had a peek behind the scenes. I usually talk to people a lot before I agree to collab with them, just so I can vet them and see if we would be a good match. And I think I said on that stream, like, you know, there were aspects of our first conversation where I'm like, I don't know what it is you're cooking, but I'm enjoying the smells that are coming out of the kitchen. Like, I don't know, like you were talking about like irony and like, oh, I don't want to just make philosophy content. And back then in our first conversation, I'm like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but I can tell that you really care. And I'm drawn to that. I think that's really cool to be very passionate.
It was a little cringe, wasn't it? It was like a
Oh yeah, it was cringe, but that is important because, like, you know, I'm so like Grant pilled in a kind of way where, like, because I have like a background in academia and a little bit of a background in trying to find funding for research, where I have to like put everything into the commodity landscape, right? Where like even though I can say that conversation was cringe, it wasn't cringe as in like it's cringe because it had stakes, right? It had stakes. I could feel that this is an epistemological framework that you have for content creation that is unexplored, right? Because you're exploring new territory with this approach, even if I didn't understand it, but I do understand it now, or at least I think I do. But back then I'm like, you're cooking something, but you care enough to cook, right? And that's not really a given for a lot of people who are trying to be who are single-mindedly focused on one metric of approval in content creation, and that is the number. right? I think the number will follow, but if you are focused on the number, then that is craft and not art, right? You are crafting for the algorithm as opposed to making art. And the art that you make, I'm excited to, do you want to plug your thing, by the way?
Oh goodness. I mean, I guess I could.
Go plug your thing.
I could. Yeah. This is like, towards the end anyways.
Yeah.
I haven't finished it yet, and I said I would finish it like 3 months ago, and it's still not done. But I was gonna make I've made it, or I'm in the process of editing a video on the trolley problem, and I think I'll preview it to everyone here who's in Vi's chat now a little bit. So I was gonna say cover your ears, but like you wouldn't even know to expect it, so it wouldn't matter anyways. The video is on the trolley problem, and it's specifically about the original paper that writes about the trolley problem. And the original paper was about a very hot button topic at the time, which is like the problem of, well, life in some sense. And it was it was about like the abortion argument. Abortion argument / debate. I wanted to say the word debate. And that itself is something that people don't know in relation to the trolley, because the trolley problem itself has been extracted and appropriated since then for its own, like, it's an ethics, but it's like, oh, but like that's an actual real controversial issue. We don't want to talk about that. Let's instead talk about like hypotheticals and people on train tracks and whatnot, because it's a bit more distant, right? It's not as close to us. And the thrust of the video, or like the way it's presented, is it's like, I'm revealing this dark truth that actually the trolley problem was about abortion, and that's super interesting because it's controversial. And it's like, that is the appeal that it has as content. And towards the end of the video, and I'll spoil, I'll preview it to you guys, but towards the end of the video, I kind of fall into this reflection upon the point of emphasizing this fun fact, right? This neat piece of trivia that, oh, the trolley problem was about this or that. Like, but why does it matter? Like, why did I emphasize it? Well, I emphasized it, and you could have like Googled the paper and just read the paper. If you cared about the trolley problem, you could have Googled the trolley problem and then read the original paper, and you could have gotten all of the information that you could have gotten from me. But you didn't care enough to do that, right? The only reason you clicked on my video is because I packaged it in a way that was like forbidden knowledge. It's hidden from you, and then you receive it from me, and you walk away satisfied. But then, what are you doing then? Like, what you are doing is you're just satisfying your content brain, and you just wanted to like another fun fact. Oh, now I know this about the trolley problem. Okay, and like the only reason I did this video, the only reason I did this was because initially I wanted to make content as well. I wanted to make content on the trolley problem, and I was like, I don't know. I could talk about, I could just do a 101 of it, but people have done that. For example, my colleague in philosophy, Axion, who is like a legitimate like lecturer, who has like a PhD and everything in philosophy, has done a 101, and I could never do it better than he could. So like, what's the point of it? Like, why do I want to make content? Why do I want to make a trolley problem video? Oh, I know, I can talk about the original paper, because nobody talks about the original paper. And then like, I do this descent basically into madness, I guess, like mostly like halfway through the video, where like I realize, okay, what is the point of me doing anything when I'm just feeding the algorithm, and like you are not gaining anything critical from this? Like, what is the point of you watching any videos? What's the point of me making them? And then it kind of crawls back into the me crashing out the audience, I guess. Yeah.
I think like that's, again, like coming back to the point of like cringe as an expression of individualism, right? Because it's cringe to be an individual. We're just like gray glob, right? Like the Fairly Odd Parents episode where you just all are gray gobs, because it's cringe to stand out. That's part of where we derive a lot of the cringe feeling from, is the hammer, the nail that sticks out. And I think my mentality was a lot like yours, where you said Axion, by the way, philosophy, if you are aware of us, V Theorem, we're a science communication group of VTubers. Charis is a part of philosophy, similar group, lovely content, very interesting people. I do frequent their streams. But what you said about contrasting yourself with Axion is actually really important to me, because I had the same attitude, right? Like, Axion is a better lecturer. Axion is a professional, like a professional lecturer. Like you made the choice to not compete with him in that space, because you know that the product you made would be like his but worse, which I think is fair. right? Because there's this tension between like, we want to make good content, but we also are telling you just make content, doesn't matter if it's good. There's two things that are true, right? You used Axion to better define yourself, right? Like you saw Axion and you thought, that's not who I am. I am not the lecturer that he is. I did the same when I started my channel because, you know, there's lost footage of me. I paid $500 for a recording studio at my university where I was just a guy in front of a camera with like a green screen in the back and explaining biology as a guy. I'm never releasing that, obviously. But I watched it. I spent $500 on this stupid thing. And I watched it and I was like, this is garbage.
The university made you spend money on it?
Yeah, because it's not, I didn't get it for free, right? This is my personal project. I'm not selling it to the university. So I was just like, I am nowhere near, like I used that experience to be like, I am not the guy that stands in front of the green screen, right? I know that about myself now that I've tried it. And instead I'm like, you know, Phi, the little cartoon, little blue ball, I'm sorry if you don't find me cute, but I feel like this feels a lot more unique to me as a human, as a neutrophil, right? Oh, controversial. Phi is a human as a neutrophil. But I want to point out that it is cool that you saw, you know, it's not discouraging. It didn't discourage you from making the trolley problem video. That Axion did it, but in a lecture and probably better than you can. But what it did is it helped refine your own expression of self, which I think is important. So when you're like making art and you're like, this person draws better than me. Yeah, I actually agree. Like if you want to compare, you are not as good at being them than they are, because Axion is the best at being Axion. It's kind of a cliche, but I think that, you know, we both did it, right? I looked at Kierkegaard and I was like, well, I could do a very formal, divorced from emotion kind of video. I could have done a Hank Green thing. I took a look at them and I was like, it doesn't really feel right though. And I couldn't do it better than them. But there is no neutrophil on the internet. So I managed to carve a little piece of art out for myself. And I'm happy in that kind of lane.
Yes, I wanted to just quickly also mention that, like, it's funny that you bring up the university experience, because I also did like a thing where at my uni, like I had a project that I had to not had to do, but I had a personal project that I wanted to pursue, and I managed to convince like what was this project program at the time that like was offering funding. I didn't get funding for doing the project, but what it did allow me was like free access to like all the university's like equipment and stuff. So I also did like a thing where I stood in front of a green screen and talked and did a bunch of stuff with my friends and like as well, like about like, well, actually about making like philosophy content. And I did all of that, like recorded it all, had the script, I planned everything. I'm not going to tell anyone what the script is, because I might eventually reuse the ideas and concepts. But it was super cringe. And then when I got to the phase where I needed to edit it, I was like, man, I can't do this. This is this is not good. This is terrible. It's gross. But I'm so happy I like at least did that. I pursued it for a bit, because that allowed me to think of my next project. That allowed me to think of the next thing I did, and the next thing, and the thing after that, and then eventually that's led to Charis Euphranor. And I'm sure Charis Euphranor will lead to something else as well that I'm gonna like probably cringe a little less at.
I do find it interesting.
I guess I just don't find it discouraging, but yeah.
There's like a dialectic going on, right? There's the idea that be free, be cringe, don't care about the quality, and then we're also saying, but when we made stuff that we weren't happy with, it sucked and we hated it.
Yeah, but it's okay. It's okay to hate your stuff.
Yeah. You can hate your stuff.
Just do more.
Yeah, just do more, Fivehead. Eventually, you'll stop hating it. But it is, yeah. There was another point that I wanted to make about the whole cringe thing. The parts of you that are cringe are attractive to somebody because it makes you different than the Grey Glob stock, default NPC character that loads up in a video game. The parts that are cringe are the parts that are memorable and good. And so when I say like it's okay to be cringe, I'm also saying that like the cringe provides you the raw data on what makes you unique as a human, and then you can refine it to be more presentable is what I'll say. I think that's interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anything on the list that we have yet to cover that I still want to talk about? We managed to not talk about the what is life. I'll do that real quick. I don't care. It's one of these things that I don't really care. I talked about it in my giant virus video. We're a bag of molecules, and that's about it for me. As a biologist, that might seem strange, but if you look too carefully, it starts to all unravel. So I don't really put too much thought into defining life, because that can be very hairy and people can get very upset. And that's not the domain of science to determine why people should be upset.
Mm.
Hmm.
I mean, what is life? You're living it right now.
Yeah, you think, therefore you are. So you think, therefore you am.
What is it? What is life? I look towards you, the viewer, like I reach my hand through the screen and grab you by the shoulder. What is life?
Dang, that's the thing you
What
clicked on the
is your
thumbnail
life?
for, dude. The thumbnail said philosophical questions. There you have it, audience. That's your philosophical question for the stream.
It's just I just throw it back at you, but just quizzaciously. That's all. That's all we do. That's the whole thing. I mean, I could talk about how like when I first when Vi first approached me for this collab, I think we knew we wanted to talk about we knew we wanted to talk about this, right? Like, what is life? This was like many months ago.
Yeah, like 3 months ago. So long ago.
Yeah.
And like
like yeah.
Go on. I want to hear your recollection, sorry.
Yeah. But we originally we knew we wanted to talk about what is life, and then like we had an angle, we had a direction, and then Fi was like, okay, I've quickly realized that this project is, and this is the abiogenesis video, that it like this is its ultimate form, right? Like, it was gonna take longer than I initially thought, and so I was like, oh, that's really cool and interesting. And the research I did initially on like the what is life idea was less like, okay, here are some sources in philosophy, go read them, because I don't think that's very like, conducive to you actually like, I guess, like exploring philosophy and enjoying it. But I kept thinking, like, why is it that when I read that question, it's either through the lens of, well, biology, because you reached out to me and I was like, okay, if I ask me this question, so I'm going to think about it biologically. But then I thought to myself, okay, but what is life? And I could not seem to extrapolate any answer that wasn't inherently like very anthropocentric, that wasn't very like centered around the human experience of like existentialism, of like the fact that we out here, we living in this, we are in this world, and like, what do we do? Like, it's so scary, like it's so terrifying, this life that we live. And like that, those are like the only two kind of like corners that I was ready to come from. And what I'd spent the past few months like thinking about, even before we did this stream, because I was thinking about the question on and off, is like, why is it that not that I'm only capable of, but like I'm mainly inclined to think like existentially on like the life question? Why is it like, is it just, am I informed by my experiences at like, in my formal schooling, through the institutes that have given me my philosophy degrees, or is it, through things earlier in my formative years that have framed my perception of like life as this profound thing that we must live, like almost like I'm gesturing to like a grand big stage, that all the world's a stage, or something to that effect, right? Like, why am I so stuck only thinking about from the human perspective, and can I ever truly unstick myself from it? Because a lot of philosophers claim that they do, or like they claim that like their philosophy is precisely that, right? It starts from the existence as its own thing, not like, oh, as we perceive it, but existence itself. And then they use a lot of big fancy words, and I always think in my head like, yeah, but you're saying it. There's got to be something about you, like there's got to be something about you that makes it so that you are the one saying it. And I think that matters more. I think that matters more than like making objective facts about what life is, insofar as those objective facts of life do not inform the way you live yours, I guess.
I'd say that's related to the thing that I thought that I was missing. So the thing that I want to kind of end off with, that kind of ties it up right at the beginning when we were talking about sedative philosophy, is I think of the quality of a video not really being the video itself, but the impact on the people who view it. And I think like as you have talked about before, kind of like the content is not necessarily as important as your reaction to the content. So when you were crashing out over your teaser for the trolley problem, right? This existential crisis that you have that you teased, like,
Yeah.
you know, it's a controversial topic, abortion is, and it's important to separate the content of what you will be saying versus the intended feeling that you want the audience to have, right? Because you are trying to challenge and get people out of their, you know, mouse zone. And I think I believe that I think a lot about that as like someone who makes art. So I don't know. It's just like I think it's cool to be very aware emotionally of your reaction to certain things, to live a deeper, more fulfilling life in relationship to art, right? If you just go, I like the video, that's fine. But if you are constantly updating your emotional understanding of like, and challenging your own emotional understanding of reacting to certain things, it can be interesting and enriching as well. And it helps from becoming the like one guy who like, you know, has a chip on their shoulder who just wants to tell you you're wrong. If you constantly update what is my feeling about this argument, in addition to what do I think about the argument, I think there's some meat to that, right? That's juicy in a kind of way that I think maybe that stops you from being a BuzzFeed philosopher. Would you say that that's correct?
Yeah. You know what? I like that. I think that does stop you from being a buzz, because it's like there's always more, right? It's not static. It's not like, okay, that's it. It's finished. Am I understanding what you said correctly, right? That it keeps moving.
Yeah.
Is maybe like what I read from that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is that's what makes it not. It's BuzzFeed philosophy insofar as like you got the thing and you're like, all right, I'm done. I don't have to do philosophy. I don't have to think. I don't have to read philosophy anymore. Okay, I can move on to the next thing. If that's your approach to it, then it's BuzzFeed.
Yeah, but if you hear a controversial argument and you're keeping tabs on your own emotions, I think that's pretty good. I will point out a comment that is exactly what I've been saying, but also I think the commenter put it in better words. Philosophy is like soul's alcohol. I feel like too much of it will send you into a spiral, and we should all be plugged into the infinite dopamine instead. I mentioned before in stream, philosophy to me is both the most dangerous thing and the most useless thing at the same time. And I think that does kind of capture my opinion on philosophy. It can be dangerous or it can be very helpful. It just kind of depends on your philosophy. Oh, wow. Circular, huh?
Thank you, Robert Nozick, for suggesting the dopamine machine.
a bit of a tautology. Okay. I think our time is, we went a whole hour longer than I thought we were going to. That's actually pretty surprising to me, because I thought I was keeping good track of time, but apparently I was not. So that's pretty crazy. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Charis, for agreeing to come on with me to talk about nothing, because I always stress that like this is not important. Asterisk.
Yeah. No, actually, it's the most important thing you need to hear. Actually,
this is actually so true. It's so true. In terms of teasers, Charis, go subscribe to his channel. I have his link in my YouTube stream description. Very fun. I'm in a lot of the streams as a chatter because it's fun to antagonize him. Don't actually, but it is kind of fun. And so keep an eye out for his trolley problem video. I think Philosophy has an April Fool's stream. I think V Theorem also has an April Fool's stream. So if you're looking for some unusual content on April Fool's, I think Z and Nep and Mylan are doing an astrology stream. I didn't really read the details, but they got something cooking. I have an April Fool's thing cooking too that I'm hoping to be able to finish.
Is it a stream or a video?
A video.
Can you preview that to us?
I'm not going to preview it because I think it'll be funnier when it comes out naturally on your algorithms.
Okay.
But in terms of my next big project, I will be returning back to medicine. Not medicine. I will be returning back to human biology because I took a little bit of a break, giant virus, tiny virus, and then abiogenesis, a little bit of a break into the more philosophical edges of what is life. And then I'm going to return back to my comfort zone. And I'm going to be talking about a topic that was successfully funded 2 years ago. 1 year ago, I had a 12-hour stream about glioblastoma, and I said that if I had raised $1,000, that I would turn this stream into a video and have it be a style complete breakdown of glioblastoma, which is one of the worst brain cancers to get. I usually don't like talking about cancer because it's such a bummer. It's hard to be funny, you know, like I don't want to be like, haha, JoJo joke, cancer, right? Like, but I think because that video was fully funded, and because I've had more experience dealing with serious topics, I am finally ready to make cancer into its own video. So look forward to that. Probably going to be the next month of my life or so. Anything else you want to say, Charis? Any words of wisdom from our resident philosophy VTuber?
I mean, as you said, like nothing important is going to be said in this stream anyways. But also, like that statement in itself, you know, is important to bear in mind, that nothing really comes out of this. I think that's very important. So does that make it important? Or closing thoughts is thank you, by obviously for inviting me, but also I just wanted to say thank you everyone for the discussion in chat. I found it very, I didn't respond to everything, but I really like your viewers or your chatters in that, like they're so good at like popping off the branches from the little snippets of conversation that we make, and then like branching into their own topics, that it's so hard because I'm so easily distracted and I go on so many tangents that like every time reading comment, I'm like, yeah, then I start to think, oh wait, no, hold on, I can't, I have to stay on topic, So that's really cool, and I just want to thank everyone.
Yeah, and if you want to derail Charis, you can find him on his channel. Bye, y'all. Goodbye. Thanks for coming. Bye.
Yeah.